The three of us were born in the same city in China, but I never met them when I was in China. I came to the United States with my parents when I was in middle school, and I have lived in California since. I currently work as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. My ex-husband used to work for a consulting firm in Shanghai. He came to the United States in 2012 to study for a PhD on the East Coast. We met online shortly after he came to the U.S., were in a long-distance relationship for more than a year, and got married in January 2014. Up until the end of 2024, he never held a full-time job in the United States. The other woman and my ex-husband were high school classmates. She used to work for the Chinese Navy and then a tech company in Shanghai. She came to the United States in 2015 to study for a PhD in Virginia. She later worked for a semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. For the remainder of this post, I will refer to my ex-husband as David and the other woman as Michelle. Disclaimer: David and Michelle are not their real names. Before we were married, David told me multiple times he planned to drop out of the PhD program after completing the master's requirements and then move to California in summer 2014 and look for a job. Shortly after we were married, David told me he was making very good progress in his PhD, and it would be a shame to drop out. He said he wanted to complete the degree, and he could probably finish in less than 4 years. What he said made sense, and I wanted to be a supportive wife, so I agreed. Around the same time, he also told me he found a summer internship at Baidu in Shanghai, so he couldn't spend summer 2014 with me in California. In summer 2015, David again went to intern at Baidu in Shanghai. After returning, he confirmed that the upcoming school year would be his final year and that he would come to California as soon as he graduated. Summer 2016 came around and David had not graduated, but he said he was almost done. It's very common for PhDs to take more than 4 years, so I didn't suspect anything. He told me he didn't lease an apartment for the upcoming school year because he would be graduating soon. Instead, he lived on the couch of a friend's apartment. From that point forward, he always told me he would graduate in a couple of months whenever the topic came up. It's pretty common for PhDs to be delayed, so I still didn't suspect anything. During this time, David no longer allowed me to visit him on the East Coast because he was living on his friend's couch, so it would be inappropriate and inconvenient for me to stay there. He did, however, come visit me in California several times during this period, but some of those trips were also for his USCIS appointments. In April 2018, David finally moved to California. He still hadn't graduated, but he said his advisor allowed him to work on his dissertation in California. For the remainder of 2018, he went to the East Coast several times to meet with his advisor and was away for 2 to 3 weeks each time. In November 2018, David said he would go to the East Coast one last time for his defense. I wanted to attend his defense, but he wouldn't let me because that would put too much pressure on him. After he graduated in December, he went vacationing in Miami with friends. I was pretty upset about this because I had already planned a family vacation during Christmas, which had to be canceled. David was busy job searching after returning to California. In May 2019, he said he accepted an offer from a company in San Mateo, but he wouldn't tell me the name of this company. He just said it was a small company that I probably never heard of. On May 20th, 2019, David left home while I was at work, only leaving a note on the dining table saying he went on a road trip. A few days later, he sent me a text saying he was in Portland, Maine. I tried calling him multiple times but got no answer. I was very angry. I had been trying to plan a family vacation for the past year, but he was always busy. Yet he had several vacations without me during this time. What was I to him? I seriously contemplated separation. On June 1st, 2019, David called me telling me that he was ready to start a family. I was ecstatic after hearing this. We had been trying to have a child since the day we were married, and now he finally seemed committed. Thoughts of separation were completely out the window. David said he was in New York at the time, but wanted to come home immediately to discuss our future. He went to Washington, D.C. the next day to stay with a friend and handle some paperwork. He didn't return to California until June 18, 2019. After returning home, David said he had postponed the start date of his new job in order to focus on our family planning. On August 27, 2019, David told me he actually hadn't graduated, and his advisor was now telling him to get his act together and go back to the East Coast to finish, or he could forget about his degree. He said his advisor also found him a research assistant job at University C, which was about 50 miles from his school, so he could support himself. I was very angry that he lied to me, but it was hard to ask him to give up his degree, so I still let him go. David left for the East Coast the next day. However, he didn't live near his school or near University C. Rather, he lived next to University D, which was about 10 miles away from University C. His reason was that University D had better research facilities for his dissertation. In January 2020, I became pregnant. Just after I told David the news, he started pushing me to stay in California while he remained on the East Coast, claiming that he could focus better on his studies. I wanted him to be present during the pregnancy, but he insisted it was crucial for him to finish his degree. My parents came to help me during the pregnancy. On March 8, 2020, just as COVID started spreading, I gave birth to our daughter. David came back for the birth, but immediately started pushing me to let him return to the East Coast, claiming he needed to complete his dissertation. When I asked him to stay and help with our newborn, he said I could handle it myself, and that my parents were there to help. I lived with my parents during COVID so they could help me care for the newborn. We asked David multiple times to return to California, but he kept coming up with excuses for not returning, such as not feeling well, not safe to fly during the pandemic, etc. David finally returned to California at the end of September, but he wouldn't live with us at my parents' house. Rather, he lived by himself in our Bay Area home. He said he really needed to focus on his job search, and there were too many distractions with the baby around. He said he would try to spend a few days every week helping take care of our daughter. In reality, he came to see us about once a month and only stayed about 2 days each time. David spent the next year job searching but couldn't find anything. By the end of 2021, COVID was getting better, and there were rumors of return-to-office policies soon. In November, I talked to David about him moving back to be with his family, but he vehemently opposed that idea, saying that I would disturb his job-searching efforts. My parents talked to him after hearing this, telling him that husband and wife should not be living separately for this long, and David was visibly upset after that conversation. About a week later, he told me he needed to go to China because his father was ill, and his parents were also trying to sell a house under his name and needed his signature. I felt that the timing of this was a bit odd because at the time China had a 28-day quarantine policy, and plane tickets were very expensive and hard to get, but it was hard to say no given his reasons. On December 18, 2021, David left for China. Starting in January 2022, I would occasionally go work in the office, so I started staying in my Bay Area home for a few days every couple of weeks. In February, I started getting a lot of mail from Kaiser Permanente for David. I initially thought they were ads because we didn't even use Kaiser, so I just put them aside. On March 27, 2022, I received a postcard from Kaiser which read something like, "Thank you for visiting us." This looked suspicious, so I opened one of the previous mail pieces and it showed David went to Kaiser Fremont on February 7th, 2022. He didn't go to China. I was thinking what every woman would have thought in that situation. I called David and made him come home. He swore he was not having an affair. In fact, he was angry that I would even think he would do something so disgusting. He said he stayed at his parents' friend's house because they went to China and needed someone to watch their home. He offered to show me letters from his parents as proof if I didn't believe him. I was quite skeptical of what he said, but I had no evidence and he looked so assertive. I then thought of our daughter. She was still so young. I didn't want her to grow up in a broken family, so I chose to believe what David said. From there, I continued to split my time between my parents' house and the Bay Area, while David continued his job search. In 2022, many tech companies had layoffs and hiring freezes. It was a tough job market, so I didn't suspect anything. In July, he got a contractor position through the help of one of my mother's friends. I initially thought the job was 40 hours a week, but a couple of months later I learned that he was only working 10 hours a week. David said he was still looking for a full-time job while working part-time. On November 28, 2022, David left home at 9 a.m. to work at a Starbucks and didn't come home until around 7:10 p.m. After coming home, he started arguing with me for no reason and then started throwing things. Then he suddenly screamed, "I want a divorce!" and left home at around 7:20 p.m. I was completely baffled and had no idea what just happened. I thought he couldn't be serious about a divorce. We hadn't had any disagreements recently. Just a couple of days ago, we were celebrating Thanksgiving with my parents and were planning to take our daughter to Disneyland for her 3rd birthday. Why would he suddenly want a divorce? Around 11:30 p.m., he came back with a rental car and started moving his stuff out. At that point, I realized he was serious. He still refused to tell me what happened, and he left at around 12:30 a.m. The next evening, David came back to get some of his remaining stuff, and we talked for about an hour. He said he wanted a divorce because I didn't treat him well. His examples were that I was too controlling and that I didn't give him enough space for his career. Both allegations were completely false. Even if they were true, how come he never said anything before? Then he said he had been planning for this divorce for several years and had been consulting divorce lawyers since 2019. That sentence really sent chills down my spine. So he had been plotting against me and was just pretending all these years. From there, he gave me his proposal of asset division, essentially wanting half of my stuff, and justified his demands by throwing all kinds of legal jargon at me. He was clearly well prepared. The next few days were the darkest of my life. This was so sudden and so unexpected. It was hard for me to even digest what just happened. I couldn't eat or sleep, or do anything else but think about what had just happened. He planned this for years, and he was clearly going after my money. I started looking at what happened around 2019. In December 2018, he got his green card, and I started my current job around the same time. My 4-year work anniversary was coming up soon. Initial RSU spans 4 years, and stock price went up quite a bit during COVID. This meant my income would be having a large cliff soon. No wonder he kept asking about my income in the last couple of years. This started to make sense now. For the next few months, David constantly threatened and harassed me over the phone and texts, which brought additional trauma to the distress I suffered at the time. He came up with all kinds of false allegations, such as accusing me of being an unfit mother. He even said he already reported me to the police and CPS, which I later learned were lies. In fact, a social worker from CPS told me that I didn't need to respond to his messages since we were separated, so I started to ignore his calls and texts. Only then did the amount of harassment start to decrease. At the same time, I started to analyze his behaviors and everything he said. I felt that he was not acting alone. There was someone behind him driving all this. But who was this person? By analyzing my electricity bills, I learned that starting around March 2021, David had not been living in my Bay Area home whenever I was not there. This explained why he was so opposed to moving back to be with his family at the end of 2021. And in 2022 often told me to spend more time with our daughter at my parents' house. Where was he? It was probably the same place he stayed when he went to China. By analyzing my phone bills, I also verified David indeed started contacting his current lawyer in 2019. On April 10th, 2023, I accidentally found a Starbucks cup while cleaning my garage. The cup had Michelle's name and phone number printed on it. Who was this person? After several months of investigation, I found that David had been living with Michelle since 2016. Michelle came to the United States in summer 2015 for a PhD in Virginia, studying computer architecture, and she just graduated in August 2023. However, she only lived in Virginia until 2019 and had lived in multiple states since. David had lived with Michelle the majority of the time. David lived with Michelle in Virginia from March 2016 to April 2018. This was the time that he said he was close to graduation and lived on a friend's couch. Truth was, he was not even going to school during those times. David lived with me in California from April 2018 to August 2019, but he was often away to see his advisor or vacationing. I am sure he was with Michelle all those times he was away. David lived with Michelle near University D from August 2019 to January 2020. The apartment that I thought he was living in alone when I was pregnant was actually Michelle's apartment. In March 2020, after our daughter was born and David said he needed to focus on his studies, he actually went to Longmont, Colorado to live with Michelle. In late 2020 and early 2021, David and Michelle lived together in my Bay Area home while I was staying with my parents. In April 2021, Michelle purchased a condo in Fremont. They lived together in Fremont until Michelle sold the condo in November 2022. After the divorce, David and Michelle lived in the same apartment complex in South Bay. After that, they lived together in several other addresses in the Bay Area. In Michelle's dissertation submitted August 2023, she thanked her boyfriend David for his support and encouragement. I was not surprised that David had been cheating, but I was shocked that the relationship went back to 2016. Who was this Michelle? Their schools were hundreds of miles apart. How did they know each other? Why did they start cohabiting so quickly? Did they already know each other in China? I started investigating Michelle's background in China, and they indeed knew each other long before they came to the United States. Michelle came from a prominent family. Her father was a senior officer in the Chinese military. She and David were high school classmates in China. She attended one of the best universities in China for her bachelor's degree, majoring in electronic information science and technology. Then she went to a naval college for her master's, studying mine-detecting sonar. After graduation, she worked in the Chinese Navy for a couple of years, and then she worked for a tech company in Shanghai. This explained why David interned in Shanghai in 2014 and 2015, and he never went to Shanghai again after Michelle came to the United States. During the investigation, it was hard not to notice that both Michelle and David were incredibly strange people, and a lot of what they did defied common sense. They didn't look like typical students or typical adulterers. I really couldn't figure out who they were. Some of their abnormal behaviors were both individuals took 8 years to complete their PhD, but both left school after just 4 years. I looked up all other PhD students who studied under their advisors, about 20 of them, and not one person took more than 5 years to graduate. Why did these two take 8 years? Why did both leave school 4 years before they graduated? Both individuals attended elite universities in China and had PhD degrees. They were more than capable of making top wages in the United States, and they should know basic moral principles. Why did they have to go through all these troubles to do something so despicable? They had known each other for more than 20 years. They were way past the honeymoon phase. Why did they have to go out of their way to be together all the time? This seemed far too complicated for just an affair. Michelle seldom went to school when she was in Virginia. None of her colleagues from school knew anything about her. A few didn't even know she existed. What was she doing in Virginia? She didn't talk to her colleagues at all in school. Michelle moved frequently after leaving school in 2019. Other than the Fremont condo that she owned for 1.5 years, she didn't stay longer than half a year at any of her other addresses. Why was she always moving? Michelle was in close contact with several individuals with special backgrounds, such as individuals who work in the defense industry. How did she know these people? If David planned to be with Michelle all along, then why did he agree to have a child with me? This was just cruel. Also, Michelle didn't mind. David spent the majority of my pregnancy with Michelle near University D. He didn't have a job at the time, but he was out working every day, even on the day of our daughter's birth. What were they doing next to University D? Our daughter is now 5 years old, but David has never really cared for her. He seldom even comes to see her. He abandoned the child when she was less than 2 months old just so he could be with Michelle in Colorado. What kind of father could be this cold-hearted? David had a PhD in a STEM major, but he couldn't find a job in Silicon Valley after multiple years of job search. The judge placed a seek work order on him, which he just ignored. Why wouldn't he work? David was always very busy. Prior to the divorce, he was always in his room working. Whenever he was home, sometimes at 4 a.m. in the morning. But he never had a full-time job. What was he really doing? David called his parents almost every day and often talked for hours. Who talks to their parents that much? Was he really talking to his parents? In 2017 and 2018, David went to Stanford University almost every day that he was in California, supposedly to work on his dissertation at the library, and sometimes he wouldn't come home until midnight. David didn't graduate until October 2020. He couldn't have been writing his dissertation in 2017 and 2018. What was he really doing at Stanford? David said his previous employer in China still reached out to him from time to time for help on projects because they couldn't find anyone else who could do them. What kind of employer would seek help from an ex-employee who left 10 years ago? What exactly could he do that was so indispensable? In addition, both individuals were extremely secretive, and investigating them was incredibly difficult. Their background reports contained nothing more than their address history. The address history for David was not even correct. His report showed that he had been living with me since 2014, but he didn't live with me. Now I know why he had been using my address everywhere after we were married and wouldn't let me mail anything to him. He was trying to hide his whereabouts. David also refused to answer the majority of our discovery questions, and none of the questions pertaining to Michelle. He was sanctioned by the judge for this, yet he still refused to answer. Why couldn't he answer those questions? Some more oddities. David seldom used my home Wi-Fi. He said he preferred hotspot Xfinity Wi-Fi because our home internet was unstable. He also used this as an excuse to often work at libraries and coffee shops. It was true that my home internet was unstable. It disconnected for a few hours almost every day. I had Comcast come over several times, and they weren't able to find anything wrong. Oddly, I have not had any internet issues after David left. David unplugged all my electronic devices whenever I was not home. He said it was to prevent fire. David had alerts set up on search engines so he knew whenever someone searched for his name online. David constantly reminded me not to go through his stuff in his room, even though I never did. He moved all his stuff out the same night that he wanted the divorce. What exactly was in his room that he didn't want me to see? David would not tell me where he lived after the divorce. He also warned me multiple times not to investigate him. Exactly what was he afraid of? I am certain that the two of them were doing something shady. This was way too excessive for just adultery. But what were they doing? I think I am a fairly intelligent person, and I am usually pretty good at spotting scams. I am still surprised that I was fooled for this long. First, I never thought there were people this immoral, especially someone with a PhD degree. I think I was a bit cautious in the first couple of years of this marriage, but I really let my guard down after having the child. I never thought there were people who didn't even care about their own children. Second, David was exceptionally good at lying. He didn't just make up stories when needed, which is how most people lie, but he brainwashed me by continuously feeding me misinformation and made me have a completely false perception of him. The contrast was really shocking when he revealed his true self after the divorce. Some examples are, David would tell me from time to time that some female friends were pursuing him, or some strangers tried to hit on him. Obviously, he turned all of them down. He also told me stories of his previous relationships, and we gossiped about celebrity relationships and those of his friends. He always expressed disgust at those people who were unfaithful, including his close friends. I always thought that he was someone who was open, honest, and faithful. Well, let's just say what he did was far worse than the people he despised. David always said he was just borrowing whenever he asked me for money and would pay me back as soon as he got a job. He told me numerous times that he was an independent man and did not want me to support him. In fact, he was even ashamed that he had to rely on me for medical coverage. He often told me that once he got a job, he would pay a portion of our mortgage and family expenses. He said this as recently as 2 weeks before the divorce. I never really expected him to make too much financial contribution to the family, but I also never thought of him as a greedy person, and certainly didn't think he would take advantage of me. Boy, was I wrong. During our marriage, I had to be very careful whenever I talked to David because he became emotional, with tears, whenever I said something that might sound slightly critical. I had always thought he was sensitive and had fragile self-esteem. After I found out about Michelle, I confronted him angrily in every one of our negotiations, yet he didn't bat an eye and continued to ask for money after I was done. The shamelessness was just astounding. During our marriage, David pretended that he knew little about the United States, and he often made silly mistakes or forgot things. He also asked some very childish questions and acted helpless. Just 2 days before the divorce, he was begging me to help him with simple paperwork. This made me think he was just a simple and naive man and lowered my guard. But the fact was he knew more about the United States than I did, and he had an excellent memory. Not to mention he was extremely calculated and deceptive. David was extremely meticulous with his lies. For example, to make me believe he was living with a male friend between 2016 and 2018, he often told me stories about this roommate of his, such as where he grew up, schools he attended, his girlfriend, his looks and personality, places they hung out, etc. I never suspected the legitimacy of this roommate after hearing all these details. Little did I know he was actually living with Michelle in Virginia during that time. I did some research on this roommate. He did exist, and most of what David said about him was true, except they were not roommates. Most importantly, David was extremely tough mentally. When he lied, he always spoke with confidence and didn't appear the least bit guilty. Even when his lies were exposed, he could still keep his composure and quickly make up another story to cover up the lie. This was especially obvious during our recent negotiations. I obviously don't believe anything he says now, but I was fooled many times by his confidence and assertiveness during the marriage. I do wonder if David's lying skills were his natural abilities or acquired via some training. This lawsuit lasted 2.5 years, and it just ended about a month ago. Perhaps I will write another post at some point with more details on the whole process. The end result is I lost about 1/3 of my wealth. That's just direct loss. Indirect loss is impossible to estimate. Most importantly is the psychological trauma I had to go through and all the years that I wasted on him. My lawyer said this is considered a good outcome under current laws. Perhaps so, but how is this good? How can I not feel angry, frustrated, and disheartened? During this marriage, I tried my best to be a good and supportive wife. To date, David still couldn't state exactly how I mistreated him. He, on the other hand, was just exploiting me. Other than helping conceive our daughter, everything else he did was anti-family. I don't believe David ever intended to have a family with me. He even stated that he had wanted a divorce since 2016, and he started consulting divorce lawyers in 2019, shortly after getting his green card. David was living with another woman for the majority of this marriage and lied to me about virtually everything. The lies I mentioned in this post were just a small fraction of the lies he told. This was a complete violation of the marital contract. Even during the times that he lived with me, he didn't do any housework or care for the child. He was always busy writing his dissertation or job searching, which in hindsight were also lies, but I still don't know what he was really doing. He didn't fulfill any spousal obligations and had absolutely no contribution to the family. Despite all these, the so-called California family law worked in David's favor in almost every aspect. In particular, this so-called no-fault divorce basically doesn't matter what he did during the marriage. He was still entitled to my assets. What kind of logic is this? If everything is no fault, then what's the point of having laws? I understand it may be difficult to tell right and wrong in many family disputes, but that clearly wasn't the case here, and what he did couldn't be more vile. The purpose of laws is to set social standards, protect public rights, and serve justice. Is infidelity, lying, and scamming the kind of values that our elected officials want to promote? The court that handled this case is called the Hall of Justice. Justice is to defend the good and punish the bad. Well, perhaps that's too much to ask for, but at least don't punish the good and reward the bad. I have asked David multiple times during our negotiations why he thought he deserved such a large portion of my assets. He couldn't provide any good reasons. He just kept stating the law said he was entitled to my assets. Yeah, but this law is just utterly unfair and unreasonable. I suggest the following changes be made. If one of the spouses cohabitates with a person of the opposite sex without the other spouse's knowledge, then the times of cohabitation should not count as part of the marriage. If one of the spouses had major concealments or malicious lies which hurt the interest of the other spouse, then the non-offending spouse should be able to request a shortening of the marriage duration or receive financial compensation. I have asked David multiple times during our negotiations why he thought he deserved such a large portion of my assets. He couldn't provide any good reasons. He just kept stating the law said he was entitled to my assets. Yeah, but this law is just utterly unfair and unreasonable. I suggest the following changes be made. If one of the spouses cohabitates with a person of the opposite sex without the other spouse's knowledge, then the times of cohabitation should not count as part of the marriage. If one of the spouses had major concealments or malicious lies which hurt the interest of the other spouse, then the non-offending spouse should be able to request a shortening of the marriage duration or receive financial compensation. If one of the spouses committed serious violations during the marriage, then the non-offending spouse should not have to pay spousal support or legal fees to the offending spouse. There are about a dozen more changes that I would like to see happen to the existing family law, but the three listed above target what I feel are the most egregious and nonsensical. Part of the reason why I wrote this post is to vent. The past 2.5 years have been extremely difficult and depressing for me. More importantly, I hope what happened to me can get the attention of lawmakers so we can fix these loopholes. Governor Gavin Newsom, Senate President pro tempore Mike McGuire, Senate Leader Brian Jones, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, Assembly Leader James Gallagher, and other lawmakers in California and elsewhere, I hope you can see this and do something about it. I hope no one has to experience what I went through again. I'm still in disbelief. I can't even differentiate between the different emotions flooding me all at once. This is a story as old as the world, and here I am, an idiot? A naive younger woman? What the hell is actually wrong with this world? I can barely breathe. It's been 5 minutes since I found out, and my chest feels like someone's sitting on it. Is this the time I sign up with my therapist again? What do I even do with this information? I asked him why he doesn't have a family. He said it's because he needs to travel a lot for work. What the actual hell? How did this happen to me? To me? When did he hide all the posts with his wife? During that brief moment he showered? How many times has he cheated like this? How many more women like me are out there? How many times has his beautiful, stunning wife been betrayed? And doesn't even know? Or does she know my dad cheated on Mom? And I once collected evidence for their divorce by pretending to be another man hitting on Dad's mistresses. And they got hooked. And here I am now, no better than them. I'm so shaken I can't even unpack what's brewing inside me right now. My parents' divorce left a mark on me for sure, but this is anger, betrayal, sadness, disappointment, disbelief, disgust, absolute rage, shock, like a ton of bricks just got smashed straight into my face. And no one, absolutely no one, knows. How do I disintegrate this doing everything on my own attitude and actually trust someone else when things like this are happening all around me? What is this madness? Telling his wife would be crazy because I don't have any proof. The guy told me he was into me. Oh my God, I can't. I want to cry and laugh at the same time, but neither tears fall even though they're already in my eyes. Nor does my laughter sound loud even though I'm smiling right now. Only my jaw is still dropped to the floor. What is this overwhelming feeling? What else is there? Can everyone just leave me alone? How much more can I handle before I go absolutely insane? You know what? This is a villain origin story beginning, because I don't have time to be nice anymore. I'm done. Done for real this time. No one is disturbing my peace ever again. If I'm ever dating again, remind me to hire a professional investigator and require a mental health evaluation on the first date. It's been 3 hours now. I've been sitting on my bathroom floor, staring at my phone, scrolling through his social media again and again, looking for clues I missed, signs I should have seen. There are no photos of her recent enough. The last one is from 2 years ago, a vacation photo where she's tagged, but he isn't. Was he already planning this then? How long has he been living this double life? I keep refreshing his Instagram, his Facebook, even his LinkedIn like some kind of digital stalker. This is what I've become. This is what he's turned me into. My hands are shaking as I type his wife's name into the search bar. Sarah Michelle Torres. God, even her name sounds perfect. She's a pediatric nurse. She volunteers at animal shelters. She runs marathons for charity. Of course she does. Of course she's everything I'm not. I want to message her so badly. I want to tell her what her husband has been doing. But what would I say? Hey, I've been sleeping with your husband for 3 months, thought you should know. How do you even start that conversation? And what if she already knows? What if this is their arrangement? What if I'm the naive one thinking I discovered some big secret when really I'm just the latest in a long line of women he keeps on the side? I'm not crying anymore. The tears stopped. And now there's just this cold, burning anger spreading through my chest like ice and fire at the same time. I keep thinking about all the things he said to me, all the lies that rolled off his tongue so easily. I've never felt this way about anyone before. You're so different from other women. I wish I could spend every night with you. Work keeps me so busy, but you make it all worth it. Work. Right. Going home to his wife was his work. I'm thinking about the time he couldn't stay the night because he had an early client meeting, or when he said he couldn't go away for the weekend because he had family obligations. His family obligations were his actual family, his actual life, the life I knew nothing about. How many times did he go home to her after being with me? How many times did he kiss her with the same mouth he'd been kissing me with hours before? I feel sick. Actually sick. I run to the toilet and dry heave, but nothing comes up. My stomach is empty. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I can't help myself. I need to know more. I start going through our text messages, looking at them with new eyes. All those times he said he was working late, or traveling for business. All those times he couldn't video call because he was in meetings or in a bad signal area. I screenshot everything. I don't know why, but I need evidence. Evidence of what? I don't know. Evidence that this happened? Evidence that I'm not crazy? Evidence to show someone someday that this wasn't my fault? I Google his wife again. I find her Instagram, her Facebook, her LinkedIn. I spend 2 hours going through her photos, her posts, her life. She looks happy. She looks loved. She posted a photo last week of flowers he apparently brought her just because. The same week he told me he was falling for me. She posted a photo of them at dinner last month. The same restaurant where he took me 2 weeks later. The same table, probably. Did he tell the waiter we were celebrating our anniversary like he told me? Or did he just think it was funny to bring his mistress to the same place he takes his wife? I find their wedding photos. They got married 4 years ago. A beautiful outdoor ceremony. She looks radiant. He looks happy. Genuinely happy. The same way he looked at me when we first met. How long has he been doing this? Maybe this is my fault somehow. Maybe I should have asked more questions. Maybe I should have been suspicious when he never wanted to stay the whole night. Maybe I should have wondered why he never invited me to his place. He always said his apartment was being renovated, and that's why we always came to mine. For 3 months, his apartment has been being renovated. How stupid am I? Maybe I should have been suspicious when he never posted any photos of us together. He said he liked to keep his private life private. I thought it was romantic. I thought it meant what we had was special, just for us. Maybe I should have wondered why he never introduced me to his friends. He said they were immature, and he didn't want them corrupting what we had. I ate it up like the naive idiot I am. Maybe I should have been suspicious when he always paid in cash. He said he was old-fashioned and didn't trust credit cards. I thought it was charming. Maybe I should have wondered why his phone was always face down when we were together, why he stepped away to take calls, why he never let me use his phone even for something simple like playing music. Every red flag looks so obvious now. Every lie seems so transparent. How did I miss all of this? How did I let myself be fooled so completely? I keep going back to her photos. Sarah, his wife. She's beautiful in that effortless way that some women just are. Natural blonde hair, perfect smile, looks like she's never had a bad skin day in her life. She runs marathons. I get winded walking up the stairs to my apartment. She's a pediatric nurse. She saves children's lives. I work in marketing for a company that sells overpriced coffee makers. She volunteers at animal shelters. I've never volunteered for anything in my life. She posts motivational quotes about gratitude and positivity. I post memes about being tired and needing wine. Of course he went home to her. Of course she's his real life, and I'm just, what? A distraction? A side quest? A way to feel young again? I wonder if he compares us. I wonder if he tells her she's better than me without her even knowing I exist. I wonder if he uses things he learns about me to be a better husband to her. Does he bring her flowers because I mentioned I love sunflowers? Does he make her breakfast because I told him it's my favorite meal? Does he listen to her work stories because I taught him how to ask the right questions? Am I training him to be a better husband to someone else? The worst part isn't even the betrayal. It's the humiliation. The feeling like everyone else knew except me. The feeling like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't even know was being told. I think about our mutual acquaintances. Jake, who introduced us at that networking event. Did Jake know? When he said, "You two would be perfect together," did he know David was married? Was this some kind of sick joke to him? I think about the barista at our coffee shop who always smiled knowingly when we came in together. Did she know? Did she see him come in with his wife too? Was she judging me, thinking I was the other woman who didn't even know it? I think about my coworkers who I told about him. How excited I was. How I said I thought he might be the one. How I showed them photos of the gifts he bought me. Were they pitying me? Were they wondering if I was really that naive? I think about my sister who said she was happy I finally found someone who seemed stable. If only she knew how stable he was. Stable enough to maintain two separate relationships without either woman knowing about the other. How many others are there? Am I the only side piece, or is this a pattern? Is Sarah the only wife, or are there others I don't know about? How does he keep it all straight? Does he have a system? Does he write notes to remember which lies he told to whom? Does he have different phones for different women? When he said, "I love you" to me last week, how many other women had he said it to that same day? When he said he'd never felt this way before, was he telling the truth in that moment? Or has he said those exact words to a dozen other women? When he touches me, is he thinking about her? When he touches her, is he thinking about me? Or are we both just nameless, faceless bodies to him? How does he sleep at night? How does he look at himself in the mirror? How does he function knowing he's destroying multiple lives for his own selfish pleasure? Does he feel guilty? Does he feel anything at all? Or is this just a game to him? I think I'm in shock. Real, actual shock. Like when something traumatic happens and your brain just can't process it. It keeps trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. I keep waiting to wake up. I keep thinking this is some kind of nightmare, and I'll open my eyes and it'll be this morning again. Before I knew. Before my entire world shifted. But it's real. This is real. The man I thought I was falling in love with doesn't exist. He's a character, a performance, a lie wrapped in a smile and expensive cologne. The David I knew is fiction. The real David is someone I've never met. Someone who can look me in the eyes and tell me he's falling for me while wearing his wedding ring on a chain around his neck. Oh God, that necklace he always wore that he said was a family heirloom. It was his wedding ring, wasn't it? The real David is someone who can make love to me and then go home and make love to his wife. Someone who can plan a future with me while already having built a life with someone else. The real David is a stranger. A dangerous stranger who got access to my body, my heart, my dreams, my trust, under false pretenses. I let a stranger into my life, into my bed, into my heart, and I called it love. I need to tell her. I know I said I don't have proof, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe she deserves to know even if she doesn't believe me. Maybe I would want someone to tell me even if it hurt. But what if she blames me? What if she thinks I'm lying? What if she thinks I'm just some jealous ex trying to break up their marriage? What if she already knows and chooses to stay? What if telling her just makes me the bad guy in their story? What if he finds out I told her and he comes after me? What if he makes my life hell? What if he spreads lies about me? What if she's pregnant? What if they just bought a house? What if telling her destroys more than just their marriage, but what if there are other women? What if I stay quiet and he just keeps doing this to more people? What if my silence makes me complicit? What if she's in danger? What if he's not just a cheater but something worse? What if staying quiet puts her at risk? I don't know what to do. I've never been in this situation before. There's no handbook for what to do when you find out you're the other woman. It's been a week since I found out. I haven't contacted him. I haven't contacted her. I've just been existing, going through the motions of my life while feeling like I'm watching someone else live it. I called in sick to work 3 days this week. I told them I had food poisoning. In a way, I do feel poisoned. Poisoned by lies, by betrayal, by the knowledge that someone I trusted was playing me for a fool. I haven't eaten a real meal since I found out. Everything tastes like cardboard. My friends keep asking if I'm okay, and I keep saying I'm fine, because how do you explain this? How do you tell people that you've been living in a fantasy for 3 months? I keep picking up my phone to text him, not because I want him back, but because I want answers. I want him to explain how he could do this. I want him to tell me if any of it was real. I want him to suffer the way I'm suffering. But then I remember that he's probably at home with his wife, living his real life, and I'm just a problem he doesn't have to deal with anymore. He probably doesn't even know that I know. He probably thinks he got away with it. Maybe he has gotten away with it. Maybe that's what makes this worse. I've made a decision. I'm going to tell her. Not because I want to destroy their marriage, but because she deserves to know who she's married to. Because if it were me, I'd want someone to tell me. I'm going to write her a letter, a real letter, not an email or a text or a direct message that could be ignored or deleted. Something she has to physically hold, something that feels real and serious. I'm going to tell her everything. How we met, how long it's been going on, the things he told me about not having a family. I'm going to include screenshots of our conversations, photos he sent me, anything that proves this is real. I'm going to apologize. Not because this is my fault, but because I'm sorry she has to find out this way. I'm sorry her husband put us both in this position. I'm sorry for the pain this will cause her, and then I'm going to disappear from both of their lives. I'm going to block his number, delete him from my social media, and never look back. I'm going to focus on healing from this and making sure nothing like this ever happens to me again. I'm going to therapy, real therapy with someone who specializes in betrayal trauma. I'm going to figure out how to trust again, how to spot red flags, how to protect myself. I'm going to tell my sister and my best friend what happened. I'm going to stop carrying this shame alone. This isn't my fault. And I'm not going to act like it is. I'm going to take a self-defense class. I'm going to learn a new skill. I'm going to travel somewhere I've always wanted to go. I'm going to do all the things that remind me that I'm worth more than being someone's secret. Dear Sarah, my name is Emma, and I don't know you, but I know your husband David. I'm writing this letter because I believe you deserve to know something that I recently discovered about him. 3 months ago, I met David at a networking event. He told me he was single, that he traveled a lot for work, and that he'd never been married. We began a relationship that I believed was exclusive and honest. Last week, I discovered that David has been married to you for 4 years. I found your social media profiles and realized that while he was telling me he was falling in love with me, he was living a completely different life with you. I had no idea you existed. I would never knowingly enter into a relationship with a married man. The moment I found out about you, I ended all contact with him. I'm telling you this not to hurt you, but because I believe you have a right to know. If I were in your position, I would want someone to tell me. I know this is devastating news, and I'm so sorry you're learning about it this way. I'm sorry your husband put us both in this position. I'm sorry for any pain this causes you. I've included some evidence with this letter. Screenshots of our conversations where he talks about being single, photos he sent me, receipts from dates we went on. I want you to know that this is real, and that I'm not some vengeful ex-girlfriend trying to cause trouble. After I send this letter, I will have no further contact with either of you. This chapter of my life is closed, and I hope you can find the closure and peace you deserve. I'm sorry Emma drove to their house today. I know where they live now. I found their address online. It's a beautiful neighborhood, the kind of place where families raise children and couples grow old together, the kind of place I thought David and I might live someday. Their house is beautiful too, a craftsman-style home with a well-maintained garden and a swing on the front porch. I can see why he wanted to protect this life. I can see why he thought it was worth lying for. I sat in my car across the street for an hour, watching. I saw her leave for work. She drives a blue Honda Civic with a coexist bumper sticker and another one that says Dog Mom. Even her car is wholesome. I saw their dog in the front window, a golden retriever who looked happy and loved. Even their dog has a better life than I do right now. I waited until I was sure David had left too. Then I walked up to their front door and slipped the letter through the mail slot. I heard it hit the floor on the other side, and there was no taking it back. I drove away quickly, my heart pounding like I'd just committed a crime. Maybe I had. Maybe telling the truth is a crime when it destroys people's lives. But it's done now. The truth is out there, sitting on their entryway floor, waiting for her to come home and find it. It's been 3 days since I sent the letter. I keep checking my phone, expecting... What? A call from her? A text? An angry voicemail from him? Nothing. Radio silence. Maybe she hasn't found it yet. Maybe she's out of town. Maybe the letter got lost or buried under other mail. Maybe she did find it and decided I'm crazy. Maybe she threw it away without reading it. Maybe she showed it to David and they laughed about the delusional woman who thinks she had an affair with him. Maybe she read it and believed it, but decided to stay with him anyway. Maybe she's choosing to fight for her marriage instead of running away from it. Maybe she's sitting in her own bathroom floor right now, feeling exactly like I felt a week ago. Maybe she's going through the same spiral of disbelief and rage and humiliation that I went through. The not knowing is almost worse than the original betrayal. At least then I was only responsible for my own pain. Now I might have caused hers too. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. last night. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Emma? Her voice was quiet, shaky. I knew immediately who it was. Yes. I got your letter. Silence. Neither of us knew what to say next. Is it true? She finally asked. Yes. More silence. How long? 3 months. I heard her intake of breath, sharp and painful. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me, she said, and her voice was stronger now. You didn't know. He did this. This is his fault. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about finding the letter, about confronting David, about his initial denials, and then his eventual confession. She told me about the other women she'd started to suspect over the years, but had always talked herself out of investigating. She told me she was grateful I'd told her. She said she'd been feeling crazy for months, sensing that something was wrong, but having no proof. She said my letter gave her the validation she needed to trust her instincts. She told me she was leaving him, that she'd already called a lawyer, that she was staying with her sister until she could figure out her next steps. She thanked me for my courage in telling her. She said she knew it couldn't have been easy. I would have wanted to know, she said. If it were me, I would have wanted someone to tell me. I hoped so, I said. But I wasn't sure. You did the right thing, she said. We both deserved better than this. It's been a month since everything came out. Sarah and I have become unlikely allies in this mess. We've texted a few times, sharing stories about David's lies, comparing notes on his methods of deception. She told me about other things she'd found, receipts for restaurants he'd never taken her to, charges on their credit card for gifts she'd never received, unexplained absences that made sense now. She told me he'd been cheating for years, probably since shortly after they got married. She found evidence of at least 3 other women, maybe more. I wasn't special. I wasn't even unique. I was just the latest in a long line of victims. It should have made me feel worse, knowing I was just one of many. But somehow it made me feel better. It confirmed that this wasn't about me, wasn't something I did or didn't do. This was about him and his complete inability to be faithful to anyone. Sarah filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. She's asking for everything, The house, the dog, half his retirement, spousal support. She has evidence of his affairs now, including the documentation I provided, and her lawyer says it strengthens her case significantly. David has tried to contact me 17 times since Sarah confronted him. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at my apartment once. I've ignored all of it. I have nothing to say to him, and he has nothing to say that I want to hear. I changed my phone number. I am considering moving apartments. I want a completely fresh start with no traces of him anywhere in my life. I started therapy 3 weeks ago. Dr. Martinez specializes in betrayal trauma, and she's helping me understand that what I experienced was a form of psychological abuse. David didn't just cheat on his wife. He manipulated and deceived me too. She's helping me understand that the person I fell for never existed, that David created a character specifically designed to appeal to me, and that character was no more real than a movie character. The real David is someone I never met. She's teaching me about red flags, about trust, about how to protect myself in future relationships without becoming paranoid or closed off. She says healing is possible, that I can learn to trust again, but it will take time. I told my sister and my best friend everything. They were angry on my behalf, supportive, loving. They didn't judge me for being naive or stupid. They reminded me that being trusting isn't a character flaw. It's the way decent people operate in the world. I joined a support group for people who've experienced infidelity and betrayal. It meets every Tuesday evening in the basement of a community center downtown. There are 8 of us, men and women, young and old, all trying to make sense of how someone we loved could deceive us so completely. It helps to know I'm not alone. It helps to hear other people's stories and realize that smart, successful, intuitive people get fooled too. It helps to share my story and have people nod in understanding instead of asking why I didn't see the signs. I'm different now. Not broken, but different. More careful, but not paranoid. More aware, but not cynical. I'm learning to trust my instincts in a way I never did before. I can see now that there were signs with David. Little inconsistencies that I explained away because I wanted to believe his version of events. I'm learning to pay attention to those inconsistencies, to ask follow-up questions, to trust my gut when something feels off. I'm also learning to be okay with being alone. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm focusing on myself, on my career, on my friendships, on becoming the person I want to be outside of any romantic context. I got a promotion at work. I started taking salsa dancing lessons. I booked a trip to Portugal for next month, somewhere I've always wanted to go, but never made the time for. I'm filling my life with things that bring me joy, things that have nothing to do with anyone else's validation or approval. I'm learning that I don't need someone else to complete me. I was whole before David, and I'm whole after him. He was an experience, not a requirement. Looking back now, I can see that David did me a favor. Not intentionally, obviously, but he showed me what I won't accept. In a relationship, he showed me the importance of consistency, transparency, and integrity. He showed me that love without honesty isn't love at all. He also showed me my own strength. I survived the discovery. I made the difficult decision to tell Sarah. I ended things cleanly and completely. I got help when I needed it. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I'm stronger now than I was before I met him. Sarah is doing well too. She's living in a new apartment with her dog. She's dating someone new, another nurse from her hospital, who treats her the way she deserves to be treated. She seems genuinely happy, lighter than she was during her marriage. We don't talk regularly anymore, but we check in occasionally. There's something powerful about having someone who understands exactly what you went through, who lived the other side of the same betrayal. As for David, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he's struggling. The divorce is expensive. His reputation in our professional circle is damaged. Sarah made sure people knew what he did, not out of spite, but to protect other women from falling into the same trap I did, I don't take pleasure in his struggles, but I don't feel sorry for him either. Actions have consequences. He chose to live a lie, and now he has to live with the fallout. It's been 6 months since I found out about David's double life. 6 months since my world imploded and I had to rebuild it from scratch. I'm okay now. Better than okay, actually. I'm happy in a way that feels solid and real, built on a foundation of self-knowledge and self-respect rather than someone else's approval. I've started dating again, slowly and carefully. I'm taking it one day at a time, one person at a time, one conversation at a time. I'm asking the hard questions up front. I'm paying attention to consistency between words and actions. I'm trusting my instincts. Most importantly, I'm not settling. I'd rather be alone and happy than in a relationship that requires me to ignore red flags or make excuses for someone's behavior. I know my worth now, and I won't accept anything less than someone who recognizes it too. The old me might have seen this experience as a failure, a failed relationship, a failed judgment call, a failed attempt at love. The new me sees it as education. Expensive education, painful education, but education nonetheless. I learned what I won't accept. I learned how to trust my instincts. I learned how to ask hard questions. I learned how to stand up for myself and others. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. Most importantly, I learned that being betrayed doesn't make you naive or stupid or weak. It makes you human. And choosing to trust again after betrayal doesn't make you a fool. It makes you brave. I'm not the same person I was before David. I'm better, stronger, wiser, more aware of my own worth, and less willing to compromise it for someone else's convenience. And that, I think, is the best revenge of all. Becoming someone who could never be fooled by someone like him again. If you're reading this and going through something similar, know that you're not alone. Know that it's not your fault. Know that you will survive this and you will be stronger for it. Trust the process. Trust yourself. And never ever settle for someone who doesn't see your worth. You deserve better. We all do. I paid all the bills. He still left me. I paid every bill. Rent, groceries, his car note, everything. And somehow, he still told me I wasn't doing enough. He said, "You're always working. I feel alone." But the only reason I was working so much was to take care of us. I'd wake up at 5, come home past 9. Never cheated, never yelled. I just kept pushing because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Provide, support, handle it. He used to text me, "I'm so proud of you." Then one day, it turned into, "We don't talk anymore. You're emotionally unavailable. I need more." He started going out more. Boys' nights, basketball games, coming home later and later. One night he came home at 3:17 a.m., didn't even bother lying. He looked me straight in the face and said, "We haven't been happy in a long time." I just stood there, thinking about all the hours I worked, all the times I said, "Don't worry, I got it." Then I found the messages, screenshots. There was a number saved as Marcus, only it wasn't Marcus, it was her. I stared at his phone screen, my hands shaking. The contact photo was of some random guy from his basketball team, but the messages were definitely from a woman. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. I hate that you have to go home to her." The timestamps went back months. While I was working 70-hour weeks to keep us afloat, while I was transferring money into his account for his expenses, while I was believing his stories about boys' nights and pickup games, he was building a whole relationship with someone else. I scrolled up through the conversation, each message feeling like a knife twist. There were inside jokes, pet names, plans for dates I was unknowingly funding, photos I couldn't bring myself to look at. My legs gave out. I sat on our bathroom floor, the the bathroom in the apartment I paid for, and tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just cheating. This was systematic betrayal. This was months of lies, of looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me while texting another woman about how much he hated coming home to me. When Marcus came home that Tuesday evening, I was sitting at our kitchen table with printouts of the messages spread in front of me. I'd spent the entire day screenshotting everything before he could delete it. "Hey, babe," he said, kissing my forehead like nothing had changed. "Long day?" "Sit down," I said. He must have heard something in my voice because his whole demeanor shifted. He saw the papers on the table, and his face went white. "I can explain." "No," I cut him off. "You can't. You can try, but you can't explain this away." I watched him pick up the first page, then the second. His shoulders sagged. "How long, Marcus?" 6 months, he whispered. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of me working myself to the bone while he played house with someone else. "Who is she?" "Someone from the gym." "Sarah? It doesn't mean anything? Don't you dare tell me it doesn't mean anything. I can see the messages. I can see you telling her you love her. I can see you complaining about me to her." He tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. "You want to know what's funny?" I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I've been killing myself trying to give you everything you wanted. And the whole time, you were telling her that I'm cold and unavailable." "You are unavailable," he said, and the audacity of it took my breath away. "When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time we went on a date? When's the last time you planned a date? When's the last time you paid for anything? I've been working double shifts so you could find yourself and figure out your career. I've been paying your car payment, your phone bill, your student loans, your everything, while you've been playing victim to your girlfriend. It's not like that. What's it like then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been funding your affair." That night, everything spilled out. 3 years of resentment. 3 years of him feeling emasculated by my success. 3 years of him telling me he was grateful while secretly resenting every dollar I made. "I never asked you to pay for everything," he said. "You never offered to pay for anything either. When's the last time you applied for a job? A real job, not some passion project that pays $20 a week." "I'm an artist, Sarah. I need time to develop my craft." "You're 28 years old. We've been together for 3 years. Your art isn't paying the bills. It's not even paying for your art supplies. I am. So what? I'm supposed to give up my dreams. I'm supposed to give up mine. I'm supposed to work myself into the ground so you can pursue your hobbies while cheating on me?" He didn't have an answer for that. "Tell me about her," I said. "Tell me about this woman who gets the best of you while I get the stressed, resentful version. She makes me feel like a man." The words hung in the air between us. In that moment, I understood everything. "And I make you feel like what? Like a failure. Like I'm not enough. Like everything I do is wrong. When have I ever said you were a failure? You don't have to say it. It's in everything you do. The way you handle all the finances. The way you make all the decisions. The way you never need me for anything. I handle the finances because you don't contribute to them. I make the decisions because when I ask your opinion, you say, whatever you think is best. I don't need you for anything because you've never been there when I needed you. I've been there. Name one time. One time when I had a problem and you helped solve it. One time when I was stressed and you took something off my plate instead of adding to it. Silence. She doesn't make you feel like a man, Marcus. She makes you feel like a teenager. No responsibilities, no bills, No real-world problems. Just fun and games and someone else's money paying for everything. Over the next few days, as I started untangling our shared life, the full picture became clear. I found receipts for dates I'd never been on. Dinners, movies, concerts, all paid for with a credit card I'd given him for emergencies. The emergency was apparently that his girlfriend expected to be taken on actual dates. I found gift purchases, jewelry, flowers, perfume, for someone who definitely wasn't me. I'd been funding his romantic gestures for another woman. I found Venmo transactions to her, money I'd transferred to him for groceries and gas, being sent to Sarum with heart emojis. But the worst part was going through our shared photos and memories and realizing how many of them were lies. That weekend, he said he was at a basketball tournament. He was at the beach with her. That week, he said he was helping his friend move. He was on a road trip with her. I'd been living with a stranger. The man I loved, the man I was building a life with, didn't exist. He was a character Marcus played when he needed something from me. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Williams, who specialized in relationship dynamics. What she told me changed everything. "You've been enabling his behavior," she said gently. "By removing all consequences from his choices, you made it easy for him to avoid growing up." I was trying to be supportive. Supporting someone means helping them become their best self. What you were doing was preventing him from facing the natural consequences of his choices. I just wanted to take care of us. But he wasn't taking care of anything. He wasn't contributing to the relationship in any meaningful way. He was a dependent, not a partner. She was right. I'd been so focused on being the strong, independent woman who could handle everything that I'd forgotten what partnership actually meant. Partnership meant shared responsibility, shared burdens, shared contributions. "What about the cheating?" I asked. "How is that my fault?" "It's not your fault. His choice to cheat is 100% on him. But the dynamic you two created, where you were the responsible parent and he was the carefree child, that made it easier for him to justify his behavior to himself." "How?" "Children don't think about consequences. They don't consider how their actions affect others. They just want what they want. You treated him like a child, so he acted like one." 3 weeks after I kicked Marcus out, I got a message on Instagram from someone named Ashley. Not the fake contact name. Her real name was Ashley. "I think we need to talk," her message said. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was younger than me, maybe 24, with that effortless beauty that comes from not having stress lines carved into your face yet. "I didn't know he was living with someone," she said immediately. "He told me you were just roommates, that you were helping him out financially until he got back on his feet." "We were together for 3 years," I said. "He said you guys tried dating, but it didn't work out, that you were better as friends. He said you were kind of controlling, that you insisted on managing his money because he was bad with finances." I almost laughed. "What else did he tell you?" "That you worked all the time and barely talked to him. That you treated him more like an employee than a friend. That you were always stressed and took it out on him." "And you believed that?" "Why wouldn't I? I mean, who lies about something like that?" She was so young, so naive. I remembered being that trusting once. "How did you two start?" He was at the gym looking really down. I asked if he was okay, and he just opened up about how lonely he was. How hard it was living with someone who didn't really care about him. I felt bad for him. And when did it become more? Pretty quickly. He was so sweet, so attentive. He'd text me all day, plan these amazing dates. I thought I'd finally found a guy who actually knew how to treat a woman. "With my money," I said quietly. "What?" "The dates. the gifts, the attention. I was paying for all of it. Every dinner, every movie, every flowers he bought you. It was all with my money. Her face went pale. That's not... He said he was freelancing, graphic design. He hasn't had a paying job in 2 years. I've been supporting him completely. She was quiet for a long time. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're involved with. And because he's about to need a new source of income. You think he'll want me to... I think Marcus is very good at finding women who want to take care of him. The question is whether you want to be his next meal ticket. Ashley broke up with Marcus 2 days after our coffee meeting. She sent me the screenshots, him begging her to reconsider, promising he'd change, telling her he loved her and couldn't live without her. The same words he'd said to me when I kicked him out. Marcus tried everything to get back into my life. He showed up at my workplace, at my apartment, at my gym. He called my friends, my family, even my boss, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and needed help. He promised he'd changed. He said the affair meant nothing. He said he'd get a job, start contributing, be the partner I deserved. But I was done. I'd spent 3 years trying to turn a boy into a man, and all I'd gotten for my efforts was betrayal and lies. The hardest part wasn't missing him. It was missing the version of him I'd created in my head. The grateful, loving partner I thought I was supporting. The man who appreciated my sacrifices. The relationship I thought we were building together. None of that had been real. Untangling our finances was a nightmare. 3 years of shared accounts, shared bills, shared debt that was really just my debt in both our names. I discovered that Marcus had been taking cash advances on the credit cards I'd given him, almost $15,000 worth. Money that went to gifts for Ashley, trips with Ashley, expenses I knew nothing about. I had to hire a lawyer to get him off our lease, out of our shared accounts, removed from my insurance policies. Every step cost money I didn't have because I'd spent 3 years supporting 2 people on one income. My credit was damaged from the cash advances and missed payments during the chaos of our breakup. I had to move to a smaller apartment, sell my car and get something cheaper, take on freelance work on top of my regular job just to get back to financial stability. The worst part was realizing how much of my own life I'd sacrificed. I hadn't taken a vacation in 2 years. I hadn't bought myself new clothes in months. I hadn't gone out with friends because I was always either working or too tired from working. I'd been so focused on providing for us that I'd forgotten to provide for me. Through mutual friends, I learned that Ashley wasn't Marcus's first affair. There had been others, women who thought they were dating a struggling artist, women who paid for dates and trips and gifts thinking they were supporting someone they loved. There was Jessica, who he'd dated for 4 months while telling me he was taking evening art classes. She'd funded a weekend trip to Napa that he'd told me was a workshop. There was Maria, who he'd met at a coffee shop and convinced to pay his phone bill for 3 months because his freelance check was delayed. There was even a woman named Rachel who'd hired him for what she thought was legitimate graphic design work, but the work was really just an excuse for him to spend time at her apartment while she paid him for projects that never materialized. I wasn't special. I wasn't his one true love who just wasn't enough. I was his primary source of income, and these other women were his side hustles. Marcus had turned manipulating women into an art form. He was better at that than he'd ever been at actual art. 6 months after kicking Marcus out, I started to feel like myself again. Not the myself I'd been during our relationship, the stressed, overworked, taken for granted version, but the person I'd been before him. I remembered that I liked going to museums. I remembered that I was funny when I wasn't constantly worried about money. I remembered that I had dreams and goals that didn't involve fixing someone else's life. I started saying no to things. No to friends who only called once they needed favors. No to family members who expected me to solve their problems. No to anyone who wanted to take more than they were willing to give. I started dating again slowly. The first few guys I met seemed nice, but I found myself automatically calculating how much they spent on dates, whether they had real jobs, whether they seemed like they had their lives together. Dr. Williams helped me recognize that I'd swung too far in the other direction. Not every man who's going through a rough patch is a Marcus, she said. The key is distinguishing between someone who needs temporary support and someone who expects permanent support. How do I tell the difference? Time and consistency. Someone who's genuinely going through temporary difficulties will be actively working to improve their situation. They'll contribute what they can, even if it's not much. They'll be grateful for help but not entitled to it, and they'll have a timeline and a plan for becoming self-sufficient again. And someone like Marcus will always have an excuse for why they can't contribute. They'll make you feel guilty for expecting anything from them. They'll frame their dependence as your choice. You're controlling, you insisted on paying, you wanted to handle everything. I met David at a bookstore. Cliché, I know, but we reached for the same book, a biography of Frida Kahlo, and started talking about art and resilience and what it means to create something meaningful. He was different from Marcus in every way that mattered. He had a steady job as a software engineer, his own apartment, his own car. When we went on dates, he paid without making a big deal about it. When I offered to split the bill, he gracefully accepted. He talked about his work with passion but not obsession. He had hobbies that he funded himself. He had goals that he was actively working toward. Most importantly, he contributed to our relationship in ways that weren't just financial. He planned dates. He remembered things I told him. He showed up when he said he would. He made my life easier, not harder. I've never been with someone who had their life so together, he told me after we'd been dating for 3 months. I've never been with someone who didn't need me to have my life together for them, I replied. It was a revelation, being with someone who saw my independence as attractive rather than threatening, someone who wanted to add to my life rather than take from it. A year after our breakup, Marcus texted me. He was in financial trouble, shocking, I know, and wanted to know if we could work things out. I showed the message to David, who just shook his head. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said, and I meant it. I'd learned something important about myself during those 3 years with Marcus. I had a savior complex. I was attracted to broken people because fixing them made me feel valuable, needed, important. But Marcus hadn't been broken. He'd been lazy and entitled and perfectly happy letting someone else handle his responsibilities while he played at being an artist and a bachelor. I'd confused enabling with loving, supporting with controlling, providing with caring. Real love isn't about fixing someone or saving them or proving your worth through sacrifice. Real love is about partnership, 2 whole people choosing to build something together. Marcus taught me what I wouldn't accept in a relationship. David taught me what I should expect. 2 years post-Marcus, my life looked completely different. I'd been promoted at work, not because I was desperately trying to make enough money for 2 people, but because I had the mental energy to focus on my career. I'd bought my own house, a small but beautiful place that was mine alone, that no one could take from me or expect me to share. I'd rebuilt my savings, paid off the debt from Marcus's credit card adventures, established an emergency fund that gave me peace of mind. Most importantly, I'd rebuilt my sense of self-worth. I no longer measured my value by how much I could do for other people. I measured it by how true I was to my own values and goals. David and I moved in together after dating for 1.5 years. We split everything 50-50, rent, utilities, groceries, everything. When one of us was having a tough month financially, the other would cover more. But it was always temporary and always reciprocated. We talked about money openly, planned for the future together, made decisions as a team. It was the kind of partnership I thought I had with Marcus but had never actually experienced. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the time I spent with Marcus. if I wish I'd seen through his acts sooner, if I'm angry about the money I lost or the years I wasted, the honest answer is complicated. I regret the stress, the financial damage, the way I lost myself in trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. I regret enabling his behavior and making it easy for him to avoid growing up. But I don't regret learning what I learned. I don't regret becoming the person those experiences made me. I learned that generosity without boundaries is just enabling. I learned that love without reciprocity is just self-sacrifice. I learned that you can't save someone who doesn't want to save themselves. I learned to value my own needs, my own dreams, my own financial security. I learned that being independent doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means being with someone who chooses to share the load rather than add to it. Most importantly, I learned that being used doesn't make you a victim forever. It makes you wiser, stronger, better at spotting the red flags you missed before. 3 years after our breakup, I heard through mutual friends that Marcus was engaged to a woman named Jennifer who'd recently inherited money from her grandmother. I felt sorry for her, but not in a bitter way, in a genuine way. She was about to learn what I'd learned, but probably the hard way. I thought about reaching out to her, warning her somehow, but I knew it wouldn't work. Just like I wouldn't have listened if someone had tried to warn me about Marcus when we first met. Some lessons you have to learn yourself. David and I got engaged that same year. Our relationship was everything my relationship with Marcus hadn't been. Balanced, honest, supportive in both directions. When David proposed, he didn't just ask me to marry him. He asked me to build a life with him, to be his partner, not his caretaker, to share dreams and responsibilities and adventures. That's what I'd always wanted. I just hadn't known the difference between that and what I'd had with Marcus. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the one paying all the bills, making all the plans, handling all the responsibilities, while your partner complains that you're not giving them enough attention, please listen to me. You are not responsible for fixing another adult. You are not responsible for funding someone else's dreams while sacrificing your own. You are not responsible for proving your love through financial support. A real partner will contribute what they can when they can. They'll be grateful for help but not entitled to it. They'll work toward independence, not away from it. They'll add value to your life, not just take from it. Don't confuse being needed with being loved. Don't confuse enabling with supporting. Don't confuse control with care. You deserve a partner, not a dependent. You deserve someone who chooses you, not someone who uses you. And if you're with someone who makes you feel guilty for expecting basic reciprocity and respect, who frames their lack of contribution as your choice to be controlling, who cheats on you while you're working yourself to death to support them, leave. You're not responsible for fixing them. You're responsible for protecting yourself. Trust me, the life you'll build without them will be so much better than the life you're building for them. I paid all the bills, and he still left me. But you know what? That was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to learn the difference between being strong and being used, and that knowledge saved my life. Nobody tells you how loud a phone can feel when the person who called you is no longer alive. For 3 years, I kept that one unopened voicemail at the bottom of my call log. It was from Mark, my husband, left on a Tuesday afternoon, just a few hours before his heart surgery. The surgery that, on paper, was routine, it wasn't. He never woke up. We were married for 12 years. No kids, just a small house with creaky floors, a garden I always meant to fix, and 2 mismatched mugs we fought over every morning. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but it was ours. Real, lived in, a little bruised, but full of laughter and small rituals. The morning of the surgery, he kissed my forehead and joked, "Don't forget to feed my sourdough starter. That thing's more high maintenance than I am." I rolled my eyes, told him he was being dramatic, and said I'd call after work. I never got to. The call came instead from a nurse. Unexpected complication. Heart gave out. He was gone in minutes. Those were the words that split my life in half. Before and after. Before that call, I was a wife planning dinner and thinking about weekend groceries. After that call, I was a widow who didn't even know what that word meant when applied to someone like me. In the days that followed, the paperwork, the funeral, the fridge full of food from well-meaning people, I noticed the voicemail. I saw the timestamp. 1 hour before the surgery. My finger hovered over the play button more times than I could count. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. What if he said something too final? What if he sounded scared? What if his voice cracked? What if I broke again? I was already broken, completely shattered. But there's a difference between broken and obliterated, and somehow I knew that voicemail held the power to cross that line. So I left it, switched phones, synced everything, never deleted it. It became this presence in my life, this small digital gravestone that followed me from device to device. Sometimes I'd forget it was there, and then I'd see it during a mundane moment, scrolling through old calls, and it would hit me like a physical blow. Other times, I'd stare at it intentionally, like pressing on a bruise, testing to see if it still hurt. It always did. 3 years passed, quietly, like fog. People say grief comes in waves, but they don't tell you about the fog. The way everything becomes muffled and distant. The way you can function, go to work, pay bills, have conversations, while feeling like you're watching someone else live your life. I started going on walks again because my doctor said I needed exercise. I adopted a dog because the house felt too quiet. A golden retriever named Benny, who had been returned to the shelter 3 times for being too energetic. Mark would have loved him. Mark would have taught him to steal socks and hide under the bed. I learned how to make sourdough, just to feel close to him. It took 17 tries before I got something that resembled bread instead of a dense, sour brick. Mark's starter had died within a week of his death. I'd forgotten to feed it in my grief haze, and by the time I remembered, it was just moldy water. Starting over felt impossible, but also necessary. Like learning to breathe again. Sometimes I talk to him out loud in the car, like he was riding shotgun. I tell him about my day, about the way Benny had learned to open the tree cabinet, about how his sister had called again to check on me. I'd ask him questions I knew he couldn't answer. Should I repaint the bedroom? Would he mind if I donated his clothes? Was it okay that I was starting to have days where I didn't think about him every single minute? The silence where his answers should have been was louder than any response could have been. Then one ordinary Tuesday, 3 years and 4 months after he died, I opened my phone and saw it again. One unheard voicemail. I was making breakfast. Toast with the strawberry jam Mark had made the summer before he died, still somehow preserved in the back of our refrigerator like a sweet sticky time capsule. Benny was lying in the patch of morning sunlight by the window, the same spot where Mark used to read the paper on weekends. It was such a normal moment, so unremarkable. Maybe that's why I was finally ready. I didn't plan it, didn't light candles or pour wine or sit in silence. I just tapped play, standing barefoot in the kitchen waiting for Toast. His voice filled the room. "Hey, you. I know you're probably at work and ignoring my call. Rude. Anyway, I'm about to head in. Just wanted to say I love you, and I promise I'll be fine. But if for some weird reason I'm not, please remember this. Being loved by you was the best thing that ever happened to me. And also, don't kill my sourdough starter. That thing has dreams." I laughed, a real laugh. The kind I didn't know was still in me. Then I sat down on the floor, Toast forgotten, and cried for the first time in months. Not because of the pain, but because of the gift of hearing his voice again, of knowing he left me love, wrapped in humor exactly when I'd need it most. Benny came over and put his head in my lap, the way dogs do when they sense you're falling apart. I buried my face in his fur and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back for 3 years. Relief. That his voice sounded like himself, not scared, not final, just Mark being Mark. Gratitude. That he'd thought to call, that he'd said exactly what I needed to hear, when I needed to hear it most. Grief. Fresh and sharp as the day he died, because hearing his voice made his absence real all over again. Love. So much love I didn't know where to put it all, and guilt. Because I'd waited so long to listen. Because I'd been afraid of his final words when they turned out to be a gift. I saved the voicemail, backed it up twice, wrote the words down by hand in the journal I'd stopped writing in after he died. That night, I fed the sourdough starter I'd been nurturing for 2 years, just like he would have wanted. But more than that, I called his sister. We hadn't talked in months, not out of any anger, but because grief had made me selfish. I'd retreated into myself, stopped returning calls, stopped making plans. I listened to it, I told her. The voicemail. "Oh, honey," she said, and I could hear her crying. "How are you?" "Different," I said. "I don't know if that's good or bad yet." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her kids, her job, her divorce that had finalized while I was too lost in my own grief to be a good sister-in-law. I told her about Benny, about the bread, about how I'd been talking to Mark in the car. "He would love that you're talking to him," she said. "He always said you were the only person who really listened to him." I miss listening to him. I know, but maybe he's still listening to you. Something shifted after that conversation, after hearing Mark's voice, after remembering that grief doesn't have to be a solitary journey. I started calling people back, making plans, accepting invitations I'd been declining for years. My friend Sarah invited me to her birthday party, the first social event I'd attended since Mark's funeral. I almost didn't go. I sat in my car outside her house for 20 minutes, hands shaking, wondering if I remembered how to be around people who weren't grieving. But I went in. And I had fun. Actual fun. I laughed at stories, contributed to conversations, stayed until after midnight. On the drive home, I felt guilty for enjoying myself, then immediately felt guilty for feeling guilty. "It's okay to be happy," I said out loud to Mark. "Right? You'd want me to be happy?" The silence felt different now, less empty, more spacious. Like maybe he was listening after all. I established new routines, not to replace the old ones. Nothing could replace our morning coffee ritual or the way he'd read me interesting articles from the paper, but to create structure in a life that had felt formless for so long. Every Sunday, I'd bake bread using the starter I'd finally perfected. I'd bring loaves to neighbors, to Sarah, to Mark's sister. Sharing the bread felt like sharing a piece of him. Every Tuesday, the day of the week he died, I'd do something that would have made him laugh. Visit a weird museum, try a restaurant with terrible reviews, buy a plant I had no business keeping alive. It became my way of honoring his memory without drowning in it. Every month, I'd listen to the voicemail again, not because I needed to anymore, but because I wanted to, because hearing his voice had become a comfort instead of a wound. Benny had learned my routines and appointed himself my companion for all of them. He'd sit patiently while I kneaded bread, tail wagging when the timer went off. He'd follow me on my Tuesday adventures, charming strangers who'd inevitably ask about him. He'd curl up next to me when I played the voicemail like he understood this was sacred time. Spring came early that year, and for the first time since Mark died, I looked at our neglected garden and felt possibility instead of guilt. Mark had been the gardener in our relationship. I'd always claimed I didn't have a green thumb, but the truth was I'd never tried. He'd handled the yard work, and I'd handled the inside of the house. It was one of those unconscious divisions of labor that you don't question until one person is gone, and you're standing in front of 2 years' worth of weeds. I hired someone to clear the overgrowth, but I did the planting myself. Vegetables Mark had loved, tomatoes, basil, the hot peppers he'd put in everything despite my protests, flowers that would attract bees because he'd always been fascinated by pollinators. I had no idea what I was doing. I called Mark's sister for advice, watched YouTube videos, asked the teenagers at the garden center more questions than they probably wanted to answer. My first attempts were disasters. I overwatered some plants, underwatered others, planted things too close together or too far apart, but I kept trying. There was something hopeful about putting seeds in the ground and believing they'd grow. By midsummer, I had actual vegetables. Nothing like Mark's perfect rows and abundant harvests, but real food that I had grown with my own hands. The first tomato I picked, I ate standing in the garden at sunset, juice running down my chin, crying and laughing at the same time. I did it, I said out loud. It's not as good as yours would have been, but I did it. That night, I made pasta with my homegrown tomatoes and basil, and for the first time in 3 years, I sat only one place at the table without feeling like something was missing. Have you thought about dating? Sarah asked one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my back porch, Benny snoring at our feet. The question hit me like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected. People had been hinting at it for months, but because I realized I had been thinking about it, and that scared me. I don't know how, I said. You were with Mark for 12 years. Before that, you dated. That was different. I was different. I was someone who hadn't been married, hadn't lost a spouse, hadn't spent 3 years learning how to be alone. And now you're someone who has. That doesn't make you broken, Claire. That makes you experienced. What if I'm not ready? What if I never am? What if you are and you're just scared? I thought about that conversation for weeks. The idea of being with someone who wasn't Mark felt like betrayal, but so did the idea of being alone forever when I was only 42 years old. I imagined going on a first date and having to explain that I was a widow. I imagined trying to care about someone else's stories when Mark's were still so vivid in my memory. I imagined kissing someone else and feeling wrong about it. But I also imagined growing old alone, never sharing inside jokes again, never having someone to call when something funny happened at work. What do you think? I asked Mark during one of our car conversations. Would you be okay if I tried to find someone? The answer came not in words, but in a memory. A conversation we'd had years ago when his grandfather died and his grandmother started dating again within a year. Good for her, Mark had said when his mother expressed disapproval. Grandpa would want her to be happy? Love isn't finite. Just because she loves someone new doesn't mean she loved Grandpa any less. I'd agreed with him then. I just never thought I'd be the one applying that philosophy to my own life. I didn't jump into dating. Instead, I started with friendship. I joined a book club at the local library, signed up for a pottery class, volunteered at the animal shelter where I'd found Benny, small steps toward rebuilding a social life that didn't revolve around couple friends who no longer knew how to include me. The book club was full of retired teachers who had opinions about everything and weren't shy about sharing them. The pottery class was me and 7 other people who had no idea what we were doing, but were determined to make something with our hands. The animal shelter was organized chaos filled with people who loved dogs more than most humans. In all 3 places, I met people who knew me as Claire who likes mysteries, Claire who makes wonky bowls, Claire who has a way with anxious dogs, not Claire the widow, not Claire whose husband died, just Claire. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. 6 months into my pottery class, a man named David asked if I'd like to get coffee after class. He was recently divorced, kind, patient with my terrible pottery skills. He made me laugh without trying too hard. I should probably tell you, I said over coffee. I'm a widow. My husband died 3 years ago. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was. It still is sometimes. Do you mind me asking what happened? I told him about Mark, about the surgery, about the 3 years since. He listened without trying to fix anything or offer platitudes. He just listened. Thank you for telling me, he said when I finished. He sounds like he was a good man. He was? I'd like to hear more about him sometime, if you're comfortable sharing. He was a big part of your life. And just like that, I knew David was someone I wanted to know better. David and I took things slowly. Coffee dates became dinner dates, became long walks with Benny, became quiet evenings on my couch, watching movies and talking about everything and nothing. He never tried to replace Mark or compete with his memory. He asked questions about my marriage, looked at photos, listened to stories. He understood that loving me meant accepting that I'd been profoundly shaped by losing someone I loved. I don't want to be Mark, he told me one evening, 6 months into whatever we were becoming. I want to be David. And I want you to want David, not a replacement for someone else. I do want David, I said, and I meant it. But I need you to understand that Mark is always going to be part of me. Not in a way that takes away from us, but in a way that made me who I am. I wouldn't want it any other way, he said. The woman I'm falling in love with was shaped by all her experiences, including losing her husband. I love all of you, Claire. Not just the parts that started after we met. That night, for the first time in almost 4 years, I fell asleep next to someone. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Loving David didn't erase my love or Mark. It didn't heal all my grief or make me forget what I'd lost. What it did was show me that the human heart has infinite capacity for love, that choosing to open yourself up again after loss isn't betrayal, it's courage. David moved in gradually. First a toothbrush, then some clothes, then half the closet. We talked about everything, boundaries, expectations, the ways grief might show up unexpectedly in our relationship. He wanted to understand my routines, the Sunday bread making, the Tuesday adventures, the monthly listening to Mark's voicemail. Would you like me to give you space for those? He asked. No, I said. I'd like you to be part of them if you want to be. So David learned to bake bread from Mark's recipes. He came on my Tuesday adventures, adding his own sense of humor to the quest to find ridiculous things to do. He sat quietly while I listened to the voicemail, holding my hand when I needed comfort. He never tried to replace Mark's traditions. He added his own. Friday pizza nights, Saturday morning hikes, Sunday evening phone calls with his daughter from his first marriage, a 16-year-old who grilled me thoroughly before deciding I was okay, I guess. She likes you, David told me after one particularly intense video call where Emma had interrogated me about my intentions toward her father. How can you tell? She asked if we were going to have kids together. She wouldn't bother asking if she didn't think you were sticking around. The kid question was complicated. Mark and I had tried for years without success, eventually accepting that children weren't in our future. At 44, with a new relationship, the possibility felt both distant and charged with meaning. What do you think? I asked David. I think whatever happens, happens. I have Emma, you have Benny. We have each other. Anything else is bonus. I loved him for not putting pressure on a question that felt too big for where we were. The 4th anniversary of Mark's death fell on a Tuesday, which felt appropriate. David offered to take the day off work, but I wanted to honor it the way I always had, alone with my memories. I woke up early and made breakfast from Mark's favorite recipe, blueberry pancakes that were more blueberry than pancake. I ate them in the garden I'd learned to tend, watching Benny chase butterflies between the tomato plants. I went to the cemetery for the first time in 2 years. I'd stopped going because it felt performative. Mark wasn't there. He was in the sourdough starter and the garden and the voicemail and the way I'd learned to live without him. But this year, I wanted to visit, to tell him about David, about the life I was building, about how grateful I was for the time we'd had together. I brought flowers from the garden, sunflowers and zinnias and the cosmos that had reseeded themselves from his original plantings. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him the way I did in the car, except this time I wasn't asking for permission or forgiveness. I'm happy, I told him. Not the same kind of happy I was with you, but happy. David is good to me. He makes me laugh. He loves Benny, and Benny loves him, which I think you'd appreciate. You always said Benny was a good judge of character. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree above his grave. It felt like listening. I still miss you, I continued. I still love you. That's never going to change. But I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living. And I think you'd be glad about that. I left the flowers and drove home to David, who was making dinner with vegetables from my garden. He hugged me when I walked in, not asking how I was or what I needed, just holding me until I was ready to let go. Thank you, I said. For what? For letting me love you both. 6 months later, David asked if he could listen to Mark's voicemail with me. I'd been expecting the question, but it still caught me off guard. The voicemail had been mine alone for so long, my private connection to Mark, my monthly ritual of remembrance. Are you sure? I asked. Only if you're comfortable with it. I don't want to intrude on something that's yours. I thought about it for a week. The voicemail was precious to me, sacred. But so was David, and maybe there was room for both. On the next monthly anniversary, a Thursday this time, I pulled up the voicemail while David and I sat on the couch after dinner. Benny was sprawled across both our laps, snoring softly. This is Mark, I said before pressing play. He called right before his surgery. I didn't listen to it for 3 years. David nodded, taking my hand. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room, familiar and warm and still capable of making me smile. Hey, you! I know you're probably at work and ignoring my call. Rude. Anyway, I'm about to head in. Just wanted to say I love you, and I promise I'll be fine. But if for some weird reason I'm not, please remember this. Being loved by you was the best thing that ever happened to me. And also, don't kill my sourdough starter. That thing has dreams. When it ended, David was quiet for a long moment. He sounds like someone I would have liked, he said finally. He would have liked you too, I said, and I meant it. He would have appreciated how patient you've been with me, how you've never tried to rush me or make me choose between loving him and loving you. There's no choice to make, David said. Love isn't a zero-sum game. That night, I updated my monthly ritual. Instead of listening to the voicemail alone, I listened with David. And somehow, sharing it made it feel bigger, not smaller, made Mark feel more present, not less. 1.5 years after David moved in, we got engaged. Not because we needed to prove anything or because we were trying to recreate something from our previous relationships, but because we wanted to commit to building a future together. The proposal was perfectly David, practical and romantic at the same time. He suggested it on a Saturday morning while we were making bread, covered in flour and debating whether we'd added too much salt. I think we should get married, he said, as casually as if he were suggesting we go to the grocery store. Right now? I asked, laughing. Eventually, when you're ready, if you want to. I want to, I said, surprising myself with how quickly the answer came. I really want to. We got married the following spring in my garden, surrounded by friends and family and the vegetables Mark had taught me to grow. Emma was my maid of honor, having warmed up to me considerably once she realized I wasn't going anywhere. Benny was the ring bearer, though he got distracted by a squirrel halfway down the aisle and had to be redirected. Mark's sister came, and his parents, and several of our mutual friends who had stayed in my life after he died. David's family welcomed me with open arms, understanding that I came with history and complexity and a dog who shed on everything. During the ceremony, I wore Mark's grandmother's wedding ring on my right hand, something old from my past life. David's ring was something new for our future. In my vows, I talked about second chances and the courage it takes to love again after loss. David talked about the privilege of loving someone who had loved so deeply before, who knew the value of what they were offering. We didn't try to pretend this was our first love, or our only love. We celebrated it as our love, built on the foundation of who we'd become through all our experiences, loss and joy, heartbreak and healing. 5 years after Mark's death, 7 years after David and I met, we decided to try for a baby. At 47, I knew the odds weren't in our favor, but we wanted to try. It took 18 months and 2 miscarriages before we got pregnant with Lucy. She was born on a Tuesday in October, exactly 8 years after Mark died. I don't believe in signs, but I believe in beautiful coincidences. Lucy is David's daughter and my daughter, but she's also connected to Mark in ways that feel natural rather than forced. She sleeps in the crib we set up in what used to be Mark's office. She plays in the garden he planned and I learned to tend. She eats bread made from the starter I've been nurturing for almost a decade. When she's old enough, I'll tell her about Mark, about how loving him taught me how to love deeply, and losing him taught me how to survive grief, and both of those things made me into the mother she deserves. I still listen to Mark's voicemail every month, though now it's usually while Lucy naps and David works in the garden. His voice is still a comfort, still a reminder of how much love can exist in an ordinary life. Sometimes I wonder what Mark would think of Lucy, of David, of the life I've built from the ashes of our life together. I think he'd be proud of me for not just surviving, but thriving. For not letting grief make me small or closed or bitter. Most of all, I think he'd be glad that his last message to me, that being loved by me was the best thing that happened to him, gave me the courage to believe I was worth loving again. People ask me sometimes how I moved on after losing Mark. The question always makes me uncomfortable because it implies that grief is something you get over, like a cold or a broken bone. I didn't move on from Mark. I moved forward with him as part of me. Grief isn't something you recover from. It's something you learn to carry. Some days it's heavy, some days it's light, but it's always there. And that's okay. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and I never want to stop loving Mark. But grief doesn't have to be the only thing you carry. There's room for new love, new joy, new purpose. There's room for a life that honors what you've lost while embracing what you might find. The voicemail taught me that. Mark's final message wasn't about endings. It was about love continuing, about dreams surviving, about the person you love wanting you to keep living even when they can't. If you're reading this and you're in the fog years, if you're staring at your own unopened voicemail or love letter or final text, know this: you don't have to listen to it today, or tomorrow, or next year. There's no timeline for grief, no right way to honor someone you've lost. But when you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready, that message will be waiting for you. And it might just remind you that you are worthy of love, that your story isn't over, that the person you lost would want you to keep writing new chapters. Today is Tuesday, and Lucy is 3 years old. She helps me feed the sourdough starter, standing on a step stool and stirring with more enthusiasm than technique. David is in the garden, harvesting tomatoes for tonight's pasta sauce. Benny, now 10 and considerably less energetic, supervises from his favorite sunny spot. In a few hours after Lucy goes to bed, I'll listen to Mark's voicemail. David will probably join me, and maybe we'll talk about the day or our plans for the weekend. It's become such a natural part of our routine that Lucy will grow up thinking it's normal for families to honor the people they've loved and lost. I saved the voicemail, backed it up 3 times now, wrote the words down by hand in multiple journals. But more than that, I saved the lesson that love doesn't end with death, that it's possible to build new happiness without abandoning old love, that the human heart is far more spacious than we imagine. And tonight, like every night, I'll feed the sourdough starter, because Mark was right, it has dreams. And so do I. The dreams look different now than they did when Mark was alive. They include David and Lucy and the possibility of more children, the garden we're expanding next spring, the trip to Italy we're planning for our 5th anniversary. They include growing old with David the way I thought I'd grow old with Mark, watching Lucy grow up in the house where I learned to live alone and then learned to love again. But they also include Mark, not as a ghost or a regret, but as a foundation. The love that taught me what love could be. The loss that taught me what I could survive. The voicemail that taught me to listen for love in unexpected places. Some stories end, some stories continue. This one continues, rich with memory and bright with possibility, fed by loss and nourished by hope. Just like the sourdough starter that connects all our chapters, Mark's dreams, my determination, David's patience, Lucy's future, still alive, still growing, still full of dreams. A year ago, I met the 2 people who would completely change my life at a party where I was performing. I'm a musician, and that night I was doing a small acoustic set for a friend of a friend's birthday. I remember feeling nervous but excited. Performing always gives me this weird mix of anxiety and euphoria that I've never quite figured out how to describe. I was packing up my guitar when she approached me first. "That was incredible," she said with this bright, genuine smile. "I've never heard anything like that cover of Black. You made it completely your own." Her name was Valentina, and she was 28, originally from Venezuela. There was something immediately magnetic about her. She had this infectious energy and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We ended up talking for hours that night, sitting on the host's back porch, sharing stories about music, travel, and our completely different backgrounds. I could tell from the start that she was a bit naive about certain things. She had this trusting, almost childlike way of seeing the world that I found both endearing and concerning. Having been through some serious trauma in my past, I recognized someone who maybe hadn't had her worldview shattered yet, but she seemed so well-intentioned and kind that I found myself genuinely wanting to be her friend. It was through Valentina that I met Carlos, though that meeting was much less dramatic. He was sitting quietly at the kitchen counter when she introduced us, scrolling through his phone and occasionally laughing at something he was reading. At 31, he had this calm, steady presence that was the complete opposite of Valentina's bubbly energy. "Carlos is my best friend," she said, practically glowing with affection. "We've known each other since college back home." He looked up, gave me a polite smile, and went back to his phone. I remember thinking he seemed nice but distant. Definitely not someone I'd ever be interested in romantically. How wrong I was about that. What developed between Carlos and me was the definition of a slow burn. I'm autistic and ADHD, which means my brain processes social connections and romantic feelings completely differently than most people. Add to that the fact that I'm asexual, and you have a recipe for what was definitely an uphill battle from our first meeting to anything resembling romance. For months, we were just friends who hung out in group settings. Carlos would come to my performances sometimes, always supportive but never pushy. He'd remember small details about conversations we'd had weeks earlier. He was kind to service workers, patient with difficult people, and had this way of making everyone around him feel heard and valued. I started noticing these things about him slowly, like puzzle pieces falling into place. The way he'd quietly handle problems without making a big deal about it. How he'd check in on friends who were going through tough times. The fact that he never seemed to get genuinely angry, even when he had every right to be, but even recognizing that he was objectively a catch didn't immediately translate to romantic feelings for me. That's just not how my brain works. I need time, trust, and a deep emotional connection before anything physical or romantic can develop. Carlos, apparently, had been interested in me from much earlier on. Later, he told me that he'd been attracted to my passion for music, the way I could get completely lost in a performance, and, surprisingly, my directness. Most people find my autism-related bluntness off-putting, but he said he found it refreshing. "You never play games," he told me months later. "You say what you mean, and you mean what you say." Do you know how rare that is? The turning point came during one of our late-night conversations about music. We'd been working on some songs together. He's a talented producer, and I'm always writing. And something just clicked, not just musically, but emotionally. I realized I trusted him completely, felt safe with him, and genuinely enjoyed spending time with him more than almost anyone else. When I told him I was interested in maybe exploring something romantic, he was patient about my boundaries around physical intimacy. He never made me feel broken or insufficient because of my asexuality. Instead, he focused on the emotional intimacy we were building and made it clear that he valued that connection more than anything physical we might or might not do. "I don't need sex to be happy in a relationship," he told me when we had that conversation. "I need trust, communication, and genuine connection. Everything else is just bonus." We'd only been officially dating for about a week when Carlos decided he needed to fill me in on some important background information. Given my history with my ex, who had been manipulative and dishonest in ways that still affect me 10 years later, I appreciated his transparency even though what he told me was concerning. "I need you to know about my history with Valentina," he said one evening as we sat on his couch, both of us working on our laptops but enjoying the comfortable silence together. My stomach dropped a little. I'd wondered about their dynamic. There was something about the way she looked at him sometimes that seemed like more than friendship, but I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. "We dated briefly about 8 years ago, right after we graduated college and moved here," he continued. "It didn't work out, and I thought we'd moved past it as friends. But over the years, there have been incidents." He told me about how Valentina would sometimes declare her love for him in public, usually when she'd been drinking, how she'd been hostile toward his female friends, especially his best friend from childhood, Maria, how she'd shown up outside his apartment multiple times over the years, claiming she just happened to be in the neighborhood. The window incident was the most disturbing. About 2 years ago, she'd been lurking outside his first-floor apartment, apparently trying to see what he was doing inside. He only caught her because her phone rang, and she had one of those customized ringtones that played a full song snippet. "I confronted her about it the next day," Carlos said. "She tried to deny it at first, then claimed she was just walking by. But my apartment isn't on the way to anywhere she'd normally go. The behavior had apparently stopped about 1.5 years ago when Carlos finally put his foot down and told her that if it continued, he'd have to end their friendship entirely. I believed him because I'd learned to trust his judgment, and because the patterns he described were consistent with someone who hadn't processed the end of their romantic relationship. But I'll admit, in the back of my mind, I was a little skeptical. My ex had been a pathological liar who would make up stories about other women being obsessed with him to make me jealous and insecure. It had taken me years of therapy to stop assuming every man was lying to manipulate me. "I'm telling you this because I want you to be prepared," Carlos said. "I don't think she's going to take the news that we're dating very well. Have you told her yet?" number, I wanted to talk to you first, and honestly, I was hoping we could just not make a big announcement. Let people figure it out and naturally. That approach worked for me. I'm a pretty private person anyway, and given my past trauma around relationships, I wasn't ready to make any grand declarations. We'd tell people as it came up naturally, and that felt safe and manageable. A few months into our relationship, Valentina lost her job. It happened suddenly. Apparently, the small marketing firm she worked for lost a major client and had to make cuts. It couldn't have come at a worse time. She'd just moved to a more expensive apartment and didn't have much savings. Carlos's response was immediate and generous. He started lending her money for rent, groceries, and basic necessities. When I asked him about it, he was matter-of-fact. "She doesn't have family here," he said. "Her parents are back in Venezuela, and you know how difficult it is to send money from there right now. I can't just let her struggle when I have the ability to help." I supported his decision completely. Valentina had become my friend too, and I didn't want to see her suffer. Beyond that, Carlos's willingness to help his friends financially, even when it was a significant burden, was one of the things I admired most about him. He'd grown up poor and remembered what it felt like to worry about basic necessities. But as the weeks turned into months, the financial support started to come with emotional strings attached. Valentina would text Carlos multiple times a day, not just about money, but about her emotional state. She was anxious, depressed, and increasingly dependent on him for both financial and emotional support. The guilt trip started small. "I know you're busy with your new girlfriend," she'd text, "but I'm really struggling today and could use a friend." Or, "I understand if you don't have time for me anymore now that you're in a relationship." Carlos would show me these messages, clearly frustrated but also genuinely worried about her mental health. "I don't know how to help her without enabling this behavior," he said, "but I also can't just cut her off when she's in such a bad place." The situation got worse when Carlos managed to get her an interview at a company where he had connections. It was a good opportunity, a marketing coordinator position that would have been perfect for her skills and experience. He spent hours helping her prepare, even buying her a new outfit for the interview. She showed up 30 minutes late. When Carlos told me what happened, I was stunned. 30 minutes? For a job interview when she's been unemployed for 2 months? She said she got lost, but I gave her the address 3 times and offered to drive her there myself, he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. It's like she was sabotaging herself. Miraculously, they still hired her. Apparently the interview went well enough that they were willing to overlook the tardiness. But the pattern of self-destructive behavior was starting to worry both of us. We managed to keep our relationship relatively private for several months. I told my closest friends gradually, and Carlos had mentioned it to his mother, his best friend Maria, and 1 or 2 other people. But we weren't posting couple photos on social media or making any big announcements. That changed last month when I spent the weekend at Carlos's apartment. I'd posted a few Instagram stories throughout the day, pictures of the breakfast he'd made, a video of us working on music together, a photo of his cat sleeping on my laptop. Nothing obviously coupley, but enough that someone paying close attention might put the pieces together. Valentina was definitely paying attention. Carlos's phone started buzzing with messages from her around 10 p.m. At first they seemed normal, just checking in, asking how his day was. But then they got more pointed. "I saw that Emma is at your place," she wrote. "Are you two dating?" Carlos showed me the message, and we both agreed he should just be honest. We were adults in a committed relationship. There was no reason to hide it anymore. "Yes, we've been together for a few months," he replied. What came next was a flood of messages that revealed just how much Valentina had been bottling up. She was hurt that he hadn't told her sooner. She was angry that he'd chosen me over her. She started making vague references to things she knew about me that would apparently make him realize he was making a mistake. "I'm just trying to protect you," she wrote. There are things about Emma that you don't know. When Carlos asked her to be specific, she couldn't come up with anything concrete. She made vague allusions to my past relationship trauma, suggesting that it made me unfit for a healthy relationship. She implied that my neurodivergence made me difficult to be with. She even suggested that my asexuality was just an excuse to string Carlos along without giving him what he really needed. Reading those messages felt like being punched in the stomach. Every insecurity I had about myself, every fear that I wasn't good enough for Carlos, was being weaponized against me by someone I'd considered a friend. Carlos was furious in a way I'd never seen before. "This is completely inappropriate," he told her over text. "Emma is my girlfriend, and I won't tolerate anyone speaking about her this way." Valentina's response was to block him on all social media platforms and stop responding to his messages entirely. We thought that was the end of it. Valentina had made her feelings clear, Carlos had defended me, and she'd removed herself from the situation. It seemed like the drama was over. We were incredibly wrong. 3 days after she'd blocked Carlos, I was staying over at his apartment again. We were having a quiet evening. I was reading on the couch while he worked on some music production, both of us just enjoying each other's company. Around 9 p.m., something made me look up toward the window. There was a face staring back at me. For a split second, I thought I was hallucinating. But no, there was definitely someone standing outside Carlos's first-floor window, looking directly into his living room. As soon as we made eye contact, the person ducked down and disappeared. "Carlos," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Someone was just looking through your window." He came over immediately, but by the time he looked outside, whoever it was had vanished. We stood there for a moment, both of us unsure of what to do. "Do you think it was—" I started to ask. "I don't know," he said, but his expression suggested he had suspicions. We decided to just keep an eye out and see if it happened again. We didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, I was in Carlos's kitchen making tea when I happened to glance towards the window above the sink. This time, I saw her clearly. Valentina was standing in the small space between Carlos's building and the one next to it, looking directly into the apartment. Our eyes met again. This time, instead of running away, she just stared at me for a long moment before slowly backing away into the shadows. My hands were shaking as I called Carlos over. "She's out there again. Valentina, I just saw her." Carlos immediately grabbed his phone and texted her, "I know you're outside my apartment." "What are you doing?" Her response came 20 minutes later. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm at home." But her location on Instagram stories showed she was definitely in our neighborhood, not at her apartment across town. The next morning, Carlos called Valentina directly. I could hear both sides of the conversation since he put it on speaker, partly because he wanted me to hear what she had to say, and partly because he wanted a witness to whatever she might admit to. "Valentina, we need to talk about what happened last night," he started. "I already told you I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but her voice had that defensive edge that people get when they're lying. "Emma saw you outside my window. Twice. This is exactly the same behavior I told you was unacceptable 2 years ago." There was a long pause. When Valentina spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable. I needed to see if it was real. If you were really with her." "So you admit you were there?" "I wasn't spying or anything. I was just... I don't know. I've been so confused since you told me about Emma. I thought maybe if I could just see you two together, I could accept it and move on." Carlos was quiet for a moment, and I could see him struggling with how to respond. On one hand, he was clearly angry about the violation of privacy. On the other hand, he'd been friends with this person for years and could hear how much pain she was in. "Valentina, I understand that this is difficult for you," he said finally. But lurking outside my apartment is not okay. It's not okay for me, and it's not okay for Emma. She doesn't deserve to feel unsafe in my home. I would never hurt Emma, Valentina said quickly. I was just trying to understand. Understand what? Why her? Why now? We've been friends for 8 years, Carlos. I've been here through everything. I lost my job. I'm struggling financially. I'm completely alone in this country, and instead of being there for me, you're spending all your time with someone you barely know. That's not fair, Carlos said, his voice getting firm. I have been there for you. I've been sending you money for months. I got you a job interview. I've listened to you for hours when you needed to talk. But being your friend doesn't mean I can't have a romantic relationship with someone else. But why her? Valentina's voice was getting more emotional. What does she have that I don't have? Carlos looked at me, and I could see how difficult this was for him. He'd been dealing with this dynamic for years, trying to maintain a friendship with someone who had never really accepted that their romantic relationship was over. Valentina, this isn't about Emma having something you don't have. This is about me having different feelings for different people. You and I tried dating 8 years ago, and it didn't work. That doesn't diminish your value as a person or as a friend, but it also doesn't mean I owe you a romantic relationship. The phone conversation lasted for over an hour. Valentina cried, apologized, made promises, and then tried to negotiate what Carlos's relationship with me would look like going forward. She wanted him to promise he'd still make time for their friendship. She wanted reassurance that I wouldn't try to come between them. She wanted guarantees that he wouldn't abandon her financially while she was still struggling. Carlos was patient but firm. He acknowledged her feelings while maintaining clear boundaries. He agreed to continue helping her financially for 1 more month, enough time for her to get her first paycheck from her new job and stabilize her situation. After that, she'd need to be financially independent. As for the friendship, he was willing to maintain it, but only if the inappropriate behavior stopped completely. No more lurking outside his apartment. No more hostile messages about me. No more guilt trips about his romantic choices. I need you to decide if you can actually be my friend, he told her. Not someone waiting for me to change my mind about dating you, but actually my friend who wants me to be happy even if that happiness doesn't include you romantically. Valentina agreed to all his conditions. She apologized to me through Carlos, a second-hand apology that felt somewhat hollow, but was better than nothing. She promised to respect our relationship and our privacy, but honestly, I wasn't sure how much I believed any of it. Someone who shows up outside your apartment window twice in 1 week doesn't usually just stop that behavior because of one phone conversation. The patterns Carlos had described, the jealousy, the boundary violations, the inability to accept rejection, don't typically resolve themselves overnight. In the weeks following the confrontation, things have been relatively quiet. Valentina unblocked Carlos on social media, but hasn't been messaging him constantly like she was before. She started her new job and, by all accounts, seems to be doing well there. Carlos sent her money one final time, enough to cover her rent and expenses for the month, as promised. After that, the financial support stopped. She didn't argue about it, which surprised both of us. As for me, I haven't spoken to Valentina since before all this drama unfolded. She had replied to one of my Instagram stories right before Carlos told her about our relationship, and I still haven't responded to that message. I'm honestly not sure what I would say. Part of me feels bad for her. Being unemployed and financially struggling in a foreign country without family support sounds incredibly difficult. I can understand feeling lonely and desperate, and maybe even developing an unhealthy attachment to someone who's been consistently kind and helpful. But another part of me is just angry. She was my friend too. We talked for hours about her problems, her fears, her hopes for the future. I supported Carlos helping her financially even when it was a strain on our relationship. And her response to finding out about us was to immediately try to sabotage our relationship with vague accusations and then resort to stalking behavior. I don't know if I want her back in my life, I told Carlos one evening. Even if she apologizes directly to me, even if she promises to respect our relationship, I don't know if I can trust her anymore. I don't blame you, he said. What she did was a violation of both of us, but especially you. You have every right to decide you don't want that kind of person in your life. But she's been your friend for 8 years. I don't want to be the reason you lose a friendship. You're not the reason for anything. Her behavior is the reason. If I lose this friendship, it's because she chose to act in ways that made it impossible to maintain. This whole situation has made me think a lot about friendship, boundaries, and the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Carlos's impulse to help Valentina financially was admirable, but it also created a dynamic where she became emotionally and financially dependent on him in unhealthy ways. It's also made me realize how much my past relationship trauma affects the way I interpret situations like this. When Carlos first told me about Valentina's history of inappropriate behavior, I was skeptical because my ex used to lie about women being obsessed with him, but the difference is that Carlos told me about it as a warning, not as a way to make me jealous or insecure. He was preparing me for potential problems, not trying to manipulate me. The contrast has actually made me appreciate Carlos even more. He's been transparent, consistent, and protective of our relationship without being controlling or dramatic about it. When Valentina tried to plant seeds of doubt about me, he shut it down immediately. When she violated our privacy, he confronted her directly. When she tried to make him choose between our relationship and their friendship, he made it clear that the choice was hers to make through her behavior. "You know what I love about you?" I told him the other night. "You don't create drama, but you also don't avoid dealing with it when it shows up." "That's just called being an adult," he said, but he was smiling. "You'd be surprised how rare that actually is. It's been about 6 weeks since the window incident, and life has settled into a new normal. Carlos and I are still together, still working on music, still figuring out how to navigate a relationship when one person is asexual and the other isn't, when one person is neurodivergent and the other is neurotypical. It's not always easy, but it's good, really good. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for something to go wrong because happiness feels so foreign after years of being single and convinced I was too damaged for a healthy relationship. I keep expecting you to get tired of my weirdness, I told Carlos last week. Your weirdness is my favorite thing about you, he replied. Well, one of my favorite things. I also like your laugh, and the way you get completely absorbed in music, and how you always say exactly what you're thinking. Even when what I'm thinking is completely inappropriate for the situation. Especially then. I'm learning to accept that this relationship might actually work long term, that I might actually be capable of making someone happy despite all my trauma and quirks and limitations, that someone might genuinely prefer my directness to game playing, my loyalty to drama, my weird sense of humor to conventional charm. As for Valentina, she's become like background noise in our relationship. Carlos occasionally mentions her in passing. She posted about a work success. She seemed happy in a group photo from a friend's birthday party, but she's no longer a central figure in our lives. The financial support has ended, the constant communication has stopped, and the inappropriate behavior seems to have ceased. I hope she's genuinely doing better. I hope she's building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for Carlos to change his mind about their romantic potential. I hope she's making new friends and finding healthy ways to deal with her loneliness and anxiety. But I also hope she stays away from our apartment windows. Carlos and I have started making long-term plans together, not just the music project we'd been working on as friends, but actual life plans. We're talking about moving in together officially. I basically live at his place already, but my lease isn't up for a few months. We're discussing travel plans for next year. We're even cautiously talking about what a future together might look like. I want you to know, he told me recently, that I've never felt this secure in a relationship before. Even when there was drama with Valentina, I never questioned whether I wanted to be with you. Really? Not even when she was saying all those things about me? Especially not then. The things she said just reminded me of why I love you. Your past doesn't scare me, Emma. Your neurodivergence doesn't make you difficult to love. Your asexuality doesn't make you less valuable as a partner. If anything, all of those things make you more yourself, and yourself is exactly who I want to be with. I'm still learning how to accept compliments like that without immediately looking for the catch or waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I'm getting better at it. The truth is I'm in a happy relationship, and I'm still figuring out how to handle that. After years of being convinced I was fundamentally unlovable, it's disorienting to discover that the right person can love all the parts of me I thought were too broken or weird or difficult. But Carlos seems to love me not despite my trauma and neurodivergence and asexuality, but as a complete person who includes all of those things. He doesn't try to fix me or change me or make me more normal. He just loves me as I am and builds a relationship that works for both of us. I don't know how to be this happy, I admitted to him last night. You don't have to know how, he said. You just have to let yourself be it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Let myself be happy. Let myself be loved. Let myself believe that this relationship is real and good and worth protecting from people who would try to undermine it. And if Valentina ever shows up outside our window again, well, we'll deal with that too. Together. I'm writing this update 6 months after the window incident, and I'm happy to report that life has continued to be drama-free. Valentina and Carlos maintain a distant but cordial friendship. They'll exchange pleasantries if they run into each other at mutual friends' events, but the days of daily texting and financial entanglement are over. Carlos and I moved in together officially 3 months ago. My lease was up, and it felt natural to just consolidate our lives since I was already spending most of my time at his place anyway. We've settled into domestic routines that feel surprisingly comfortable for someone who thought she'd never want to live with a romantic partner. The music project we'd been working on has turned into something bigger than either of us expected. We're actually planning to release an EP next year, and we've started performing together at local venues. There's something magical about creating art with someone you love, even when that love looks different than what most people expect. My asexuality continues to be a non-issue in our relationship. Carlos has never made me feel like I'm depriving him of something or that I need to compromise my boundaries to keep him happy. Instead, we've built intimacy in ways that work for both of us, through music, through deep conversations, through the kind of emotional vulnerability that I'd never experienced in a romantic relationship before. As for my neurodivergence, Carlos has become an expert at understanding my needs and helping me navigate situations that might be overwhelming. He knows when I need space to process, when I need him to be more direct in his communication, when I need help reading social situations that don't make sense to me. But he does all of this without making me feel like a project to be managed. You know what's funny? I told him recently. Valentina was so worried that my trauma and weirdness would hurt you, but loving me has actually made your life better. How so? Well, you're more patient now. More direct in your communication. Better at setting boundaries. Less tolerant of drama and manipulation. All good things. You're right, he said, considering this. Loving you has made me a better person. And that, I think, is what a healthy relationship should do. It should make both people better, not by trying to fix each other's flaws, but by creating space for each person to grow into their best self. I still think about Valentina sometimes and wonder how she's doing. I hope she's found her own path to happiness, one that doesn't involve pining after someone who was never going to love her the way she wanted. I hope she's learned to value herself enough to build relationships with people who choose her enthusiastically, not people she has to convince or manipulate into staying. But mostly I think about how grateful I am that the drama with her helped me realize just how good my relationship with Carlos really is. When someone tries to undermine your happiness and your partner responds by protecting and defending what you've built together, you know you've found something worth keeping. I'm in a happy relationship, and I'm finally learning how to take that for granted in the best possible way. Not because I'm complacent, but because I trusted enough to stop waiting for it to fall apart. And that might be the most surprising development of all. I never thought a phone notification could change everything until it did. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing significant was supposed to happen. I was rushing to get ready for work, scrolling through my phone while my coffee cooled on the kitchen counter. My boyfriend Alex was already gone, early meeting at his consulting firm, and I was enjoying the rare quiet in our shared apartment. That's when I saw it, a notification I didn't recognize. Calendar reminder, anniversary dinner with Emma, 7 p.m., Chez Laurent. My name is Emma, but I wasn't the Emma in this reminder. My blood went cold as I stared at the screen. Alex's phone was still connected to our shared Apple TV from last night's Netflix session, and somehow his calendar notification had popped up on my phone instead of his anniversary dinner, tonight, with someone else named Emma. I sat down hard on our couch, the same couch where we'd cuddled just 12 hours ago, watching some mindless comedy and planning our weekend together, the same couch where he'd told me he loved me 3 months ago, the same couch where I'd been mentally preparing to tell him I was ready to move in together officially. We'd been dating for 8 months. 8 months of what I thought was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. Alex was kind, funny, successful, and most importantly, he seemed genuine. After a string of terrible boyfriends who lied, cheated, or treated me like an option, Alex felt like a miracle. He remembered small details about my life. He brought me coffee the way I liked it without being asked. He never pressured me about physical intimacy and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. He made me feel seen and valued in ways I'd never experienced before. And apparently he was doing the exact same thing with another Emma I called in sick to work. I couldn't sit through meetings and pretend everything was normal when my entire world had just shifted on its axis. Instead, I did what any rational person would do in 2024. I became a digital detective. I started with social media. Alex wasn't a big poster, but he had the usual accounts. I scrolled through his Instagram, looking for any Emma who might be commenting or liking his photos regularly. There were a few possibilities, but nothing obvious. Facebook was more revealing. Alex rarely posted, but when he did, there was often a heart emoji from someone named Emma Rodriguez. I clicked on her profile. She was beautiful. Long dark hair, bright smile, looked like she worked in marketing based on her posts about campaigns and client meetings. She lived in our city, and judging by her photos, she had a boyfriend who looked suspiciously like Alex, though his face was usually turned away from the camera or partially obscured. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her photos. There was one from 2 weeks ago, a beautiful dinner spread with the caption "Perfect Date Night." Another from last month showing flowers with "When he surprises you at work." A mirror selfie from what looked like a hotel room with weekend getaway vibes, all posted on days when Alex had told me he was working late or out of town for business. I felt sick. Physically, nauseously sick. But I kept scrolling, collecting evidence like I was building a legal case. Screenshots of her posts, timestamps that lined up with Alex's mysterious absences, photos that showed glimpses of a life I knew nothing about. The worst part wasn't just that he was cheating. It was how deliberate it all seemed. This wasn't a drunk mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a full relationship. Anniversary dinners, weekend getaways, flowers at work. I was living in a carefully constructed lie. I spent the afternoon in a haze of anger and disbelief, But by evening, I'd made a decision. I needed to know more. I needed to know if Emma Rodriguez knew about me. I created a fake Instagram account and sent her a direct message. Hi, I think we might have a mutual friend. Do you know Alex Hartley? I'm trying to get in touch with him about a work thing but can't reach him. She responded within an hour. Yes! Alex is my boyfriend. Is everything okay? I can pass along a message. Boyfriend. She called him her boyfriend with such casual confidence, like it was an established fact, not a secret she was hiding. Oh, I don't want to bother him if it's not urgent. How long have you two been together? You make such a cute couple. Almost 2 years. Thank you so much. We're actually celebrating our anniversary tonight. I'm so nervous. I think he might propose. 2 years. 2 years. I stared at that message until the words blurred. I'd been dating Alex for 8 months, and she'd been dating him for almost 2 years, which meant when we met, when he pursued me, when he told me he was single and ready for something serious, he was already in a committed relationship with someone else. I wasn't the other woman. I was the other woman, and she thought he was going to propose tonight. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by tissues and the evidence of Alex's double life, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to text him and tell him I knew everything, to demand explanations and apologies and some kind of accountability for the months of lies. Another part of me wanted to just disappear. Pack my things while he was at his anniversary dinner with his real girlfriend and never speak to him again. Let him figure out that I knew when he came home to an empty apartment. But the biggest part of me knew I had to tell Emma Rodriguez the truth. She was sitting in some fancy restaurant right now, expecting a proposal from a man who was living a double life. She deserved to know before she committed to a future with someone who was capable of this level of deception. I spent an hour crafting the message. How do you tell someone that their anniversary dinner is happening while their boyfriend's other girlfriend sits at home nursing a broken heart? Emma, I need to tell you something important about Alex. I've been dating him for 8 months. I had no idea about you until today. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you deserved to know before tonight. I have proof, if you need it. I attached a few screenshots, photos of Alex and me together, text messages where he told me he loved me, calendar events we'd shared. Then I turned off my phone and waited. When I finally turned my phone back on 2 hours later, there were 17 missed calls and a flood of messages. Most were from a number I didn't recognize, but a few were from Alex. The unknown number was Emma Rodriguez. Is this real? Please tell me this is some kind of joke. I'm sitting in the restaurant bathroom crying. He was supposed to propose tonight. I feel so stupid. How long did you say? 8 months. I've been planning our future together. We were looking at apartments last weekend. How did I not know? Reading her messages broke my heart all over again. She sounded exactly like I felt, betrayed, confused, devastated. But she'd been with him twice as long as I had. Her whole adult life was probably intertwined with his. Alex's messages were different. Where are you? I came home and you're not here. Your location is off. Are you okay? Emma, please call me back. Did something happen? I'm worried. The casual concern in his messages was almost worse than everything else. He was probably sitting in our apartment, fresh from his anniversary dinner with his other girlfriend, genuinely confused about where I was, like he'd compartmentalized his life so completely that he couldn't imagine his two worlds colliding. I called Emma Rodriguez back. Is this Emma? Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know this is horrible timing. I left the restaurant, she said. I told him I felt sick. He wanted to come with me, but I said I needed to go home alone. Are you okay? She laughed, but it was bitter. Number. I'm not okay at all. 2 years of my life. I introduced him to my family. We were talking about marriage and kids and buying a house together. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You didn't know either. God, I feel so stupid. There were signs, weren't there? There had to be signs. We talked for over an hour, comparing notes, filling in gaps, trying to make sense of how Alex had managed to maintain 2 separate relationships for 8 months without either of us suspecting. The coordination required was actually impressive in the most disgusting way possible. He told Emma he traveled for work frequently, which explained his absences when he was with me. He told me he worked late and had a demanding client schedule which covered the time he spent with her. He had separate friend groups for both relationships, different restaurants and bars so we'd never accidentally run into each other, even different grocery stores. He's been living like this for 8 months, Emma said. How is that even possible? Practice, I said grimly. You said you've been together for 2 years. I'm probably not the first other woman. The silence on her end told me she was thinking the same thing. We decided to confront Alex together. Emma deserved answers just as much as I did, and frankly, I didn't trust myself to face him alone. I was too angry, too hurt, too likely to just scream at him instead of getting the truth. Emma came to the apartment. Our apartment that I now realized she'd probably never seen because Alex had kept his 2 lives so carefully separated. She was even more beautiful in person, and I could see why Alex had been drawn to her. But more than that, she seemed genuinely kind, the type of person who deserved so much better than what Alex had given her. This is where you live? She asked, looking around at the space I'd thought of as ours. Yeah, for about 6 months. He asked me to move in and said it would be good for us to take the next step. Her face crumpled a little. He's been talking to me about moving in together, too. Said his lease was up soon and maybe it was time. Of course he had. Alex came home an hour later, probably expecting to find me there so he could continue his evening as if nothing had changed. Instead, he walked into his living room to find both his girlfriends sitting on his couch, waiting for him. I'll never forget the look on his face. Pure shock, followed immediately by the kind of calculating expression that told me he was trying to figure out how to talk his way out of this. Emma, he said, looking at me. Then, Emma, looking at her. I can explain. Explain what? I asked. Explain how you've been dating both of us for 8 months? Explain how you were planning to propose to her while telling me you loved me? Explain how you've been lying to everyone in your life? It's complicated, he started. No, Emma Rodriguez said, standing up. It's really not complicated at all. You're a liar and a cheater, and you've been manipulating both of us. Emma, please let me... Which Emma? I asked. Because that's part of the problem, isn't it? You've been calling us both by the same name. Makes it easier to keep your lies straight. What followed was the most uncomfortable 2 hours of my life. Alex tried every tactics in the book in Masink: denial, minimization, blame shifting, promises to change. He told Emma Rodriguez that what we had was just physical, that she was the one he really loved. He told me that their relationship was mostly over and he'd been trying to figure out how to end it. He told both of us that he'd never meant for anyone to get hurt, but when pressed for specifics, his story fell apart quickly. If you were trying to break up with me, Emma R. said, why were we celebrating our anniversary tonight? Why have we been looking at apartments together? If what we have is just physical, I added, why have you been telling me you love me? Why did you ask me to move in with you? He couldn't answer either question without contradicting himself. Eventually, the truth came out in pieces. Alex had been with Emma Rodriguez for almost 2 years when he met me at a work conference. He'd been attracted to me, started flirting, and instead of either staying faithful to his girlfriend or breaking up with her, he'd decided to pursue both relationships simultaneously. I didn't plan for it to go on this long, he said, running his hands through his hair. I thought I'd figure out what I wanted and end one of the relationships, but then I realized I cared about both of you, and I didn't want to hurt anyone. So instead, you decided to lie to everyone, Emma R. said. I was trying to protect your feelings. By lying to us for months, I asked, by making us both believe we were in exclusive relationships, by letting her think you were going to propose while you were telling me you loved me. I do love you, he said to me. Then, turning to Emma R., and I love you too. You don't get to love both of us, she said. That's not how this works. Emma Rodriguez and I left together that night. We went to a 24-hour diner and spent hours talking about everything. Our relationships with Alex, our lives, our dreams, our complete bewilderment at how we'd ended up in this situation. I feel so stupid, she said for the 10th time. How did I not see this? How did I not know? Because he's really good at lying, I said. This was an amateur hour. He had systems in place. Different friend groups, different places, different schedules. He's probably been doing this for years. You think there are others? I think Alex is the type of person who always needs a backup plan, always needs options. I doubt we're the only two. We exchanged real contact information and promised to stay in touch. There was something bonding about shared betrayal, about being victims of the same person's manipulation. What are you going to do now? She asked as we said goodbye. Move out, start over, try to trust people again eventually. Me too, she said, though I don't know how long that last part is going to take. Alex tried to contact both of us over the following weeks. He sent long emails explaining his behavior, promising he'd changed, begging for another chance. He called and texted until we both blocked his number. He even showed up at my work once, but security escorted him out when I told them I didn't want to see him. Emma Rodriguez and I became friends, bonded by our shared experience, but also by genuine compatibility. She helped me move out of the apartment I'd shared with Alex. I helped her tell her family what had happened. We supported each other through the anger and grief and confusion that followed. 6 months later, I was living in a new apartment with a roommate I actually liked, seeing a therapist to work through my trust issues, and slowly starting to feel like myself again. The betrayal had shaken me in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just that Alex had cheated. It was that he'd been so good at lying that I'd started questioning my ability to read people at all. If I couldn't tell that someone I lived with was living a double life, how could I trust my judgment about anyone? The fact that you were fooled by someone who was exceptionally good at deception doesn't mean you're bad at reading people, my therapist reminded me. It means you were targeted by someone with a lot of practice. Emma Rodriguez was going through her own healing process. She'd quit her job, partly because Alex had connections there that made it uncomfortable, but also because she'd decided to pursue the photography career she'd always dreamed about. His betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed her from a relationship that was holding her back from taking risks. I was so focused on building a life with him that I stopped building a life for myself, she told me one day over coffee. In a weird way, finding out about you saved me from making an even bigger mistake. Marrying him, having kids with him, tying my entire future to someone who was capable of lying to my face for years. Can you imagine if we'd found out after we were married, after we had kids? I couldn't imagine it, and I was grateful I didn't have to. A year after everything fell apart, Emma Rodriguez called me with news. You'll never guess who reached out to me on Instagram, she said. Please don't tell me it was Alex. No, not Alex. A woman named Sarah. Apparently she's been dating Alex for the past 6 months. My stomach dropped. He's doing it again. He's doing it again! She found out about me the same way you found out about me. Through a calendar notification that popped up on her phone instead of his. Oh my God. Is she okay? She's devastated. But she's also angry, which I think is healthier than what we went through. She wants to know if there are others. There were others. Sarah's investigation, combined with what Emma and I already knew, revealed that Alex had been maintaining multiple relationships for years. We were just the ones who'd figured it out and done something about it. Sarah was girlfriend number 3 that we knew of, but there were signs of at least 2 more women who had been in and out of his life over the past few years. Always overlapping, always kept separate, always believing they were in exclusive relationships with a man who was planning a future with them. He's not just a cheater, Emma R. said. He's a serial manipulator. This is how he operates. The 3 of us decided to do something about it. Not for revenge exactly, but to make sure other women knew what they were getting into if they started dating Alex. We created a document detailing his patterns of behavior, his lies, his methods of keeping multiple relationships separate. We included screenshots, photos, and a timeline of his deceptions. Then we shared it with his entire social media network. It felt dramatic, but we'd collectively lost almost 4 years of our lives to his lies. Sarah had been talking about moving across the country for him. Emma R. had turned down job opportunities to stay in the same city as him. I'd given up my own apartment and combined my life with someone who was living a lie. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women came forward with their own stories about Alex, not just romantic relationships, but friendships and professional connections where he'd been dishonest or manipulative. A pattern emerged of someone who saw other people as resources to be managed rather than humans, deserving of honesty and respect. Alex tried to do damage control, claiming we were vengeful exes spreading lies about him, but the evidence was too overwhelming, and too many people had their own stories to share. His reputation was destroyed, and honestly, I felt he'd brought it on himself. Actions have consequences, and lying to multiple women for years is the kind of action that should have serious consequences. 2 years after the calendar notification that changed everything, my life looked completely different. I was in a new relationship with someone who valued honesty above everything else. David had been through his own experience with a deceptive partner, so he understood my need for transparency and consistency. We'd built our relationship slowly, with complete openness about our past, our fears, and our expectations. I know trust is hard for you after what Alex did, David told me early in our relationship. So I want you to know that you can check my phone anytime, you can meet all my friends, you can see my calendar, whatever you need to feel secure. I'd never taken him up on the phone checking, but knowing the offer was there helped immensely. Emma Rodriguez had thrived after leaving Alex behind. Her photography business was taking off. She'd traveled to 3 different countries, and she was dating someone who supported her career ambitions instead of expecting her to center her life around their relationship. I'm glad it happened, she told me recently. Not the betrayal part, obviously, but the part where I found out who he really was before I wasted any more of my life on him. Sarah had moved to a different city for a job opportunity she probably wouldn't have taken if she'd still been with Alex. She was doing well, though she'd decided to stay single for a while and focus on her career. I want to make sure I know who I am outside of a relationship before I try again, she told us. Looking back, there were signs with Alex that I'd ignored or explained away. The way he was always slightly vague about his schedule. How he never wanted me to post photos of us together on social media. The fact that I'd never really integrated into his friend group or social life. But the signs were subtle, and Alex was skilled at providing just enough information to seem transparent while actually revealing nothing important. He'd tell me about his day in detail, but the details were carefully curated to hide what he was really doing. The thing about really good liars, my therapist had said, is that they don't avoid talking about their lives. They create elaborate fictional versions of their lives and share those instead. That's much harder to detect than someone who's just secretive. Alex had been generous with information. It was just that most of the information was false. I'd learned to trust my instincts more, to ask follow-up questions when something felt off, and to pay attention to inconsistencies instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt when their stories didn't add up. But I'd also learned that being deceived by someone who was exceptionally good at deception didn't mean I was naive or stupid. It meant I'd been targeted by someone who had a lot of practice lying. 3 years after everything happened, I ran into Alex at a coffee shop downtown. I was with David, picking up drinks before a weekend trip we'd planned together. Alex looked older, tired in a way that suggested his life hadn't gone as smoothly as he'd planned. He saw me and started to approach, then stopped when he noticed David. "Emma," he said from a few feet away. "Hi, Alex." I kept my voice neutral. "You look good. Happy." "I am happy." He glanced at David, who was politely pretending not to listen while actually staying close enough to intervene if necessary. "I've been wanting to reach out," Alex said, "to apologize properly. For everything." "Okay. I know I hurt you. I hurt a lot of people. I've been in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand why I did what I did." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I hope that helps you. I was wondering if we could maybe talk sometime, get coffee, clear the air." I looked at him for a long moment, this person who had once been the center of my world, who had made me feel loved and special and valued while simultaneously doing the same thing with multiple other women. "I don't think that would be helpful for either of us," I said finally. "I've moved on, Alex. I hope you can too." He nodded, looking disappointed but not surprised. "Well, I'm glad you're happy. You deserve that." As David and I left the coffee shop, I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering hurt. Alex had become what he should have been all along, a stranger who had briefly been part of my life, and then left. "How was that?" David asked as we got in the car. "Fine," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. "It was just fine." Last week, I got a notification that made me smile, instead of panic. Calendar reminder. Book weekend getaway for Emma and David. Anniversary surprise. David had left his phone on the counter while he showered, and the notification had popped up on the screen. Unlike 3 years ago, this notification held no secrets or betrayals. It was just my boyfriend planning something sweet for our upcoming anniversary. I didn't take a screenshot or investigate further. I didn't check his social media or search for evidence that he was living a double life. Instead, I just smiled and went back to making breakfast, secure in the knowledge that David was exactly who he appeared to be. That's what a healthy relationship feels like, I realized. The absence of fear, the presence of trust, the certainty that the person you love is being honest with you, not because they have to be, but because they want to be. 3 years ago, a notification had destroyed my world. Last week, a notification reminded me how far I'd come. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Sometimes it gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even when what you need is the painful truth that sets you free. I never did thank that calendar glitch that revealed Alex's double life. But maybe I should have. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes a notification changes everything, and sometimes that's exactly what needed to happen.